Okay, we're live, Chair.
Brilliant. So welcome all to the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 19th of January 2021. Obviously, this meeting is unfortunately due to circumstance being held virtually, but just to let, as everyone knows, it's been recorded and it can also be live streamed and watched via thurrock.gov.uk webcast. And first of all, Wendy, have we got any apologies for absence tonight?
We've received no apologies, Chair, but just to note that Councillor Churchman hasn't joined us yet.
Brilliant. So we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the minutes. Are there any anything arising from the minutes that anyone wants to bring up? Anything?
Me.
Well, that's not a surprise, is it? Come on. Come on, you. Come on, me.
Thank you. On page 12, I can see that Barry's on the meeting, so I don't know whether he's going to be speaking. But I'd like to refer to the question that Councillor Holloway asked about the gates at Rookery Court, and it came from the meeting that it would be put to the portfolio holder, our comments, and we would like an investigation done to whether we could get some sponsorship. I think Joy said about maybe looking at getting the gate sponsorship, you know. So what was offered and was a decision made?
Can I come in, Luke, on that? I've got my hand up, but it's not.
Go for it.
Yeah,
go.
Not showing. Is the hand not showing?
No,
yeah, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay, thanks, Lynn. It was just to follow up on what Lynn said, really. She's already preempted me. I did mention that we should go out for sponsorship, and I can't see and couldn't see. I've read it twice, can't see anything where that was mentioned at all. And I did mention it, so it's not mentioned in the minutes.
Brilliant. I've got a. Did anyone want to come in on that? Any of the officers or Wendy?
Well, what we said was when all the consultation was completed on all of the sites, we would go back to Councillor Johnson. We have only just finished a second round of consultation on Benyon Court, and we're just putting together a paper on what all the residents have said across all the sites, and then we'll go back to Councillor Johnson with it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I've had a question actually on the minutes from one of our colleagues in the chamber. Councillor Massey from East Tilbury, and he's made an inquiry about the licensing for HMOs, the boundary, and has made a point that it doesn't extend across the whole borough. And from his perspective, you know, we all pay the same council tax, and he views it as if we should all have the same licensing conditions and protection. So I'm just wondering if anyone wants to make a comment about that, about what the future plans are, and if someone could write to Councillor Massey and you know, give an explanation as to what's going on in regard to East Tilbury.
Okay, as a brief answer, I would say when we consulted on additional licensing, there are quite strict criteria that the government has set out in law about where you can and can't introduce licensing, and East Tilbury at that time did not qualify. There just wasn't enough HMOs in the area. It's about density and the nature of the problems that people are reporting. And at that time, that wasn't the case in East Tilbury in comparison to, say, Grays, which has a lot more HMOs activity than East Tilbury does. However, as the minutes say, and as Jalal said at the last meeting, we are working to go out to consult on selective licensing, and that will obviously take into account, we're doing a piece of work now, we've just started it, on the property identification exercise, which he's talking about here, and a whole, what's the word I'm looking for, private sector stock condition survey, and that will enable us to see whether the private rented sector has changed, whether some areas have expanded or contracted, and we'll be able to then consult on what areas it would be appropriate to have selective licensing in. There are a lot of what the government calls gateways. There's a very strict process to go through to get selective licensing brought in. So we'll have a lot of hurdles to get through that. But I will get you a response from, I'll get Councillor Massey a response from Jalal on the specific issues of East Tilbury.
Brilliant. I think he'll be very pleased with that. I think Robert's got his hand up.
Yeah, just Carol, I think also if you could confirm that the funding for the team principally comes out of the fees that are charged, so it isn't a charge on the council tax as such. So it is principally out of the fees that we charge through the licensing arrangement. So it's not borne by the general council taxpayer.
That is the law, and that's how it has to be funded. If you're going to introduce a scheme, the fees you collect have to go back into funding the administration of that scheme. So that is the way that it is funded.
Brilliant. I really appreciate that. In terms of the minutes, then we've had one query on it. Can we approve the minutes? We all happy?
Agreed.
Brilliant. So we'll move on.
Chair, you're on mute.
I've not had any requests for urgent items, so we'll move on to number 4, which is declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest to make?
No.
No. Good. Brilliant. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the tenant satisfaction survey results and initial action plan report. And who will be delivering this report for us today?
I'll do a brief introduction and then Chris will take over.
Okay.
So members who've been members of the committee for a while, like Councillor Warren and Councillor Edsall, will remember that we talked about this last year. It was our intention to do this survey last summer, as in not last summer 2020, last summer 2019. However, at that time, Housemarque decided that they wanted to consult on a different methodology. So we decided that we would wait until that methodological consultation had been completed. That wasn't until January 2020, and we all know what happened last year. So we did complete this last year, and this report sets out the conclusion, the sort of findings from that survey, and an initial, as it says in the title, action plan of what we're going to do to respond to the things our tenants told us. So I'll hand over. Oh, the other thing I would say is just to clarify, this is the tenants' results. At your meeting in March, you'll have another separate report on the leaseholder survey results. We did do both. This relates solely to the tenant satisfaction survey results. There will be another report for the March agenda, for the March work plan programme on the leaseholder satisfaction survey results. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Carol. As Carol said, this report's an overview of the results from the full postal tenant satisfaction survey undertaken between July and October 2020, and it is also an outline of the initial action plan, which we've identified. So, in summary, the full postal satisfaction survey was undertaken between July and October in 2020. And in total, 2,560 tenants took part in the survey, which represents a response rate of 26%, which is very good, with 18% of responses completed online and 82% of responses completed by post. And as Carol said, for context, it's important to note that the majority of responses were received between August and September 2020. So that's not long after the coronavirus lockdown, which resulted in a reduction in services provided by the council. So beginning with the results section of the report, section 3.1 details the results of the satisfaction with housing and services section of the survey, which is a series of satisfaction questions to ascertain tenants' views of the key services provided by housing. The results from the section confirm that the homes and services provided by the council are meeting the needs of the majority of residents, with high proportions of tenants expressing satisfaction with many key service areas. Through Housemarque, we're able to benchmark Thurrock's results against 40 other comparable local authorities and ALMOs on the 5 core questions which are part of this section. And the benchmarking results demonstrate that the housing service is performing well in comparison to its benchmarking peers across all core questions, and that is demonstrated by the chart that's included with the report. Section 3.2 shows the results of the service priorities question, where tenants were asked to identify which services are their top priorities. The results confirm that repairs and maintenance is the highest priority for tenants by a wide margin, followed by quality of home and dealing with ASB. Section 3.3 shows the results of the neighbourhood problems part of the survey. Tenants were asked to indicate whether each problem in a list was a major problem, a minor problem or not a problem. The most common neighbourhood problems are indicated by tenants as part of the survey are car parking, rubbish and litter, and dog fouling and mess borough-wide. Section 3.4 details the results of the estate services section of the survey, in which tenants were asked to indicate their satisfaction levels with 6 measures. And the results show high levels of satisfaction with grounds maintenance and moderate levels of satisfaction with all other measures. Section 3.5 shows the results from the satisfaction with ASB case handling part of the questionnaire, where tenants had indicated they'd reported ASB in the last 12 months, with 12% of respondents confirming they had. Tenants' responses to this question show low levels of satisfaction amongst the cohort of tenants who have reported antisocial behaviour in the last year, with the way their case was dealt with and the final outcome of their complaint. And similarly, Section 3.6 details the results of the contact and communication section of the survey, and the results from this section show moderate tenant satisfaction levels with the ability of staff to deal with inquiries and the final outcome of inquiries. And lastly, in terms of results, Section 3.7 shows the results of the landlord characteristics section of the survey, where tenants were asked to indicate whether they agree or disagree with a host of measures. The results from this section of the survey show moderate levels of tenant satisfaction with the majority of measures, with large proportions of tenants given the neutral rating of neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. The measures with the lowest ratings overall keeps its promises, listens to views and understands my needs. Section 4 of the report provides an overview of the initial actions which have been identified from the results of the survey. The housing management team has reviewed and discussed the results and initial analysis of the data, which has identified some initial actions to address some of the dissatisfaction expressed by the tenants. While some specific actions have already been identified, such as exploring options to increase car parking spaces where possible, mystery shopping for ASB and tenant focus groups, this is an ongoing process and will evolve based on the results of further data analytics, which have also been identified as actions and will be built on further in the coming months. Hope you found the summary useful, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks for that, and well done for getting such a big response rate. I know, historically the council has just, the response rate for surveys have been absolutely appalling, so well done for marketing it in a way that, got such it's a really great sample. So well done. First question, I think, was Councillor Redsell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's the best response we've had overall. I think I've not known, we've just done a police survey for the budget this afternoon, and that was absolutely awful, when you think the people are not that interested in something. So it must be that people really, are interested in what they're doing. I don't know who would answer, Carol or Sean. When we've got antisocial behaviour in an area, why are we still relying on it? It all seems to come down to the people who complain have got to keep the diaries and everything else. I think there's a lot of sometimes there's a lot of comeback on those residents. I just feel that sometimes they're worried that the comeback on them is greater than the need to report them.
Unfortunately, Councillor Edsall, without evidence, we can't take any enforcement action. So we do need residents to come forward and tell us. We do try to work with the police to get our own officers to work with people to see if they can be professional witnesses. But without residents coming forward, particularly if we wanted to take strong enforcement action against somebody, such as evict them from their home or take a closure order, the courts simply won't do that without a significant amount of evidence.
Sorry, Chair. Is it something perhaps we need to update on some of our contracts with residents? It seems to me I've not got many in my area as council housing. Obviously we've got the flats, but with council housing we don't seem to be asking them to even tidy their gardens. We've got a lot of littering happening. One thing I'll talk with you offline, Carol, but
Sure.
I think we've got a lot of things that are happening where residents in flatted areas, just 2-story flatted, they're just putting their rubbish out and leaving it for me to see and pick up. So I think once they know that there's a councillor in the area who will report that and it will get shifted, then that's their way of doing it. They don't want to pay to have it taken away. They'd rather just stuff it outside. So I think perhaps we've got to be a little bit more in the way we build up these contracts for. It might be something we should look at, actually, as the contract that goes out for somebody who signs to get a house, because at the end of the day, some of them are getting really nice houses and they should be looking after them.
We do have quite strong clauses around antisocial behaviour in the tenancy agreement. All members can read the tenancy agreement terms and conditions because they're available on the website. So we are quite clear with residents about the standards we expect from them. But I'm always happy to hear further reports from members or residents about fly tipping or things like that. So happy to pick that up with you offline, Councillor.
Thanks, Carol. Cheers.
Brilliant. Councillor Worrell.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I think that this is a really good survey. You know, the response and the questions are right. And I'm not so worried about benching us across anybody else, another council, because I live in Thurrock and I want what's best for Thurrock. So I think for us we have to learn from this. So the first question I wanted to ask is, you know, there's some pretty stark responses in there. And for people to have taken the time, they will want to see some action off the back of it. Otherwise, next year, which I'm hoping that you're going to say we are going to do it as a yearly thing, because we'll only know we're getting better if we ask the same questions every year. Yep. So they will want to see that the percentages have moved on some of the key areas, and antisocial behaviour being one of them. And I could, Carol, before your time, so I'm not going to hold you to account for this. But I could take you to streets in Thurrock that look like Beirut. I've met with housing directors, leaders of the council. I've met with head of housings before you. You know, literally, when this is all over, it might do you good to spend some time and just say to councillors, take me to your hotspots and we will be able to show you where your key areas are for where tenants do abuse their homes, they do abuse the outside areas, they do abuse the parking, you know. So all of those areas, I think that if we're going to be, we have to be really serious about this. If we're going to do such a really good in-depth questionnaire, then we have to target ourselves to be better. So for around the neighbourhood problems, you know, how are we going to target this? And I suggest that an email goes out to 49 councillors, because 49 councillors will tell you where your hotspots are. We can narrow that down to streets for you, because we as councillors, if you're doing your job as a councillor, you should be able to give the council where your antisocial hotspots are. So I suggest that all councillors get an email saying, where's your hotspots for antisocial behaviour? And on the parking permits, I don't believe that parking permits are always the answer for being able to deal with the car parking issues. We've got a lot of roads now that are, they was never built for 2 and 3 cars to be at a house. And so when I grew up, we had a nice little road. I think my dad was the first one to really have a car in the road, so we could play on the grass areas because you didn't need it. Now, those roads, those smaller roads, are backed up with cars. And when there ain't no room, people just bump up, and it's right across all of the wards, I'm sure. They'll bump up the curb and churn all our grass up. So is there any way of us, instead of just looking at parking permits, to look at doing some more cuttings and hard standings, and could that come out of HRA money, or is that, another budget that we should be asking for it?
Okay. I have spent a lot of time going around the borough when we were able to do that, when I was able to come into the office. And I have also been to Beirut, and Thurrock bears no resemblance in any place that I've ever been in Thurrock to Beirut. So you may think it's like Beirut, but having been there, it bears absolutely no resemblance at all to Beirut. I think I'm happy to write to all 49 councillors and ask them for their hotspots. I would like to assure you we do work with the police, with other partners across the borough, including other housing associations. Obviously, we have local area groups that we go to and talk about and share intelligence about problems in different areas, and work together with others to make sure that we're tackling the more serious end of antisocial behaviour, drugs and things like that. Serious, antisocial behaviour. But I'm happy to ask councillors for that. On the neighbourhoods point, we do have 3 neighbourhood officers whose job is to walk around the borough and spot things and liaise with the other, say it's highways or the footpath that's not a HRA footpath, to liaise with our repairs teams or other repairs teams to get problems solved. One of them found a sinkhole on the Garrison's estate in Purfleet when it was only very small, and could have become a quite serious problem, and got that dealt with quite quickly. So we are taking proactive steps to make sure that we are monitoring the quality of the neighbourhoods, particularly in areas where there isn't a caretaking service.
And Carol, will this be an annual...
Did you want to follow that, Lynn? Sorry.
Yeah, will it be an annual questionnaire?
Oh, sorry, yes.
That we can measure it? And yeah, I certainly have got a few places that I'd like people to visit. Sure. And I have met with all sorts of people and tried to deal with some of this stuff. And those families still live in those houses.
Okay.
So it's really difficult.
Yeah, I would say it would be my aspiration that this should be an annual survey. But generally what we would do, we've done a full survey of all the tenants now. So what you would generally do in a statistically relevant situation is do a sample survey next time. So you weren't wearing everybody out with fatigue of many surveys, but it would still be able to give you I can't even say the word, statistically relevant results that you could measure progress against this survey with. To go back to one of your other points actually about benchmarking, appreciate your point saying you only care about Thurrock, but actually the point of benchmarking is to find the places that are doing better than us and try to learn from them about what they've done that makes them better, what gives them better results, what makes their residents more satisfied, and how can we use that if it's appropriate to our situation.
Thank you very much. I just want to let the committee know that I've just received a cease and desist letter from the Tourist Board of Beirut. Yeah, let's no more of that, people. Okay.
I loved it. I'm not saying anything bad about Beirut. I loved it when I went.
It used to be an exclusive holiday destination for the rich and famous not that long ago. Councillor
it wasn't.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the report. My concerns are on repair and maintenance. I received a lot of calls. I appreciate Carol has responded to them, some of them, but mostly in these calls, the issues what the residents were facing when the investigations were done, it was established the calls were not handled properly. They were not given proper information, but then here we see around 36.50% they are not satisfied or fairly satisfied or very dissatisfied. So what are we learning from these, and how we are implementing when we find out what the issues are and where the failures are? Or is this just data? Are we learning something from them and then implementing? One of resident in my area, she has been left for months outside on the name of a repair, and she isn't be able to come back for months. So what are we learning? Every time she's been given different dates. So what my concerns are, how we are going to learn from those residents and from this data, and how we are implementing to better this.
Okay, we do surveys every time a repair is completed. And we have monthly meetings with our repairs contractors, the main one obviously being Mears, but also with Aaron, who are our gas services and gas maintenance contractor, and the Oakray, who are our electrical repairs contractor. I only go to the ones with Mears because that's our most major contract, so I can tell you what we do there. Every month we go through those results. Chris has put together an absolutely fantastic dashboard that we can click through, and we can see all the residents and everything that they've said about being fairly or very dissatisfied. And we go through those with the manager for Mears for our contract, and we talk through, and he goes through them. He will ring people, he will find out what went wrong, and we do custom, what are they called, Chris? Learning plans, learning action plans, what are they called?
Yeah, they're called learning action plans, Carol.
I was there, good. We do learning action plans on complaints, pulling out themes, how we need to change processes and procedures. And we do go through this in a lot of detail at the Mears core group meetings every month to look at what we can learn, how we can do better, where there's been serious failures, those are taken up immediately. We don't wait for the monthly meetings, but at those we will look at the trends. Some of the things that come out on a regular basis that we're always talking about: follow-up repairs and communication. And that's where most things stem from, is have we ordered the follow-up repairs and have we clearly communicated with the residents in the situation that you're talking about? Have we said the right dates? Have we said if we're not going to meet those dates? It's really all comes down to communication. The difference between those results, which are very high in terms of satisfaction with repairs, and these results are everybody, whether they've had a repair done or not. So this is a more general kind of feeling about repairs, but they may not actually have experienced the repairs service recently. Whereas the perception that we do with people who've had a repair done at the end, when the repair's closed and finished, is much more close to the point of them experiencing the service. So we get much fresher feedback from them there, and the results there are much higher than these. But it doesn't mean we're complacent. We're still working through those results every month and pushing the contractor to do better.
Thank you. Did you want to follow that up at all?
Thank you, Carol. My concerns are when some residents, when it was kind of concluded, they were kind of miscommunicated, there is delay in, but there wasn't actually done something, to kind of repair those kind of damages, I would say. So what action are we taking once we have established there is an issue, and then are we just waiting for those repairs to be completed? Doesn't matter, it will take months and months, or will we kind of set a date okay, if we have established okay, this resident wasn't treated properly, or his call was not answered properly, he or she wasn't advised properly, so then what do we do actually to fix those problems? Or we just leave it to contractor for months or months, and then once it's completed, then we do this final survey?
Okay, two things. First of all, can you write to me about the case that you're talking about? Because I think I know what it is, but I can't remember the name and address of the person. Secondly, no, we don't. The learning action plans are all about learning. They're all about saying what went wrong, how can we stop it from going wrong in the future? So there will be things like toolbox talks with the operatives if it's an issue about using their handheld devices or how they've dealt with something. There'll be talks and learning for, say, the people on the phones in the contact centre. So we're always talking about what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or that a process is changed so that we don't keep making the same mistake over and over again. Those sorts of things. So we definitely take it seriously, and we work through those things every month. And we beat up on them, I certainly do, if they keep doing the same things over and over again.
Brilliant. Did you have your hand up previously, Joy, or if you put it up again?
Put it up again, thank you. It was just to ask Carol, really. I mean, Lynn and I can go back when we used to have meetings with Mears, and we had a working party, and that actually worked really well, didn't it, Lynn? It was something that we actually, as members, got to talk to Mears, and we actually found there was a lot of things we could help with, and we did. So perhaps there is something in there that we could bring that back in a way, because I think that's a really good way to sort out some of the problems that we have if we can talk to mayors and whoever's, you know, contracted out from mayors, because some things get lost in the contracts. I think mayors are fine, but when you start contracting out and out, it's something I think we picked up a lot of that, didn't we, Lynn, when we did that working group? It was really, really good, and it gave us a lot of input.
Yeah, definitely.
Was
yeah,
that when
really
the contract just gone to them from Morrison's? And there was
we went and watched. Yeah, we spent a day watching the call centre and, you know, getting an idea how it all works, and looked at all the boards, and, you know, and then they let us like dig down into what they do with problems and reoccurring and recharges, and that's the stuff that we miss now. You know, we don't get to see, you know, what the value for money is. And so, and literally, I think Chris come as well. I think Chris might have been on the working group as well. So it might be good for us, you know, to have like the scrutiny committee go over in the different world when we're all back together again, that we could go to mayors again and have a look and have a bit of a round table with them again.
Yeah, we'll obviously have to wait some time to be back into that world.
Yeah.
But you could certainly, I could certainly arrange for interested parties like yourselves to meet with the general manager. I'm sure he would be fine with that. We do have a resident on the core group as well. The other, not Lynn Mansfield, Lynn Goldsmith.
Brilliant.
I think
Roger?
it gave us a great, sorry, Chair, it gave us a great insight into what was happening with mayors and the contractors. It just gave us a bigger insight than when we get a case, we hand it over usually to you, Carol, or there's emails that exchange, and that's it. And that's where it's gone. And actually, it's gone from us. We don't really see it anymore. And I think for us to know how some things come to fruition or they don't, I think we need to know that as members. We need to know where that's gone. You know, it's fine for officers to know that, but we need to know, you know, and I just think that what we had, that working group, was brilliant. You know, it solved a lot of the problems that a lot of us had, and it did a lot of good. So, yeah, maybe we can do that again. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, I was just going to suggest that if we'll take that away and have a look at that and come back with some proposals, because I think there is a positive story to say about this. But I think it'd be helpful if you know, some of the senior managers like Gary could hear it directly from members at times as well. But then you also hear from them about some of the difficulties they experience sometimes trying to get access to the properties and everything. So leave that one with us, Chair. We'll take that one away and see how we can. It may not be a working group, but let's see how we can get sort of a better member oversight or something on a more regular basis. We'll take that one away.
Brilliant. So I'll conclude this item then and just say that the recommendation 1.1, that the committee notes and comments on the report. So we're all agreed with that, are we?
Agreed.
Agreed. Excellent. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the housing KPI performance report from April to November 2020 to 21. And who's going to be presenting that for us?
I'm going to let Chris do that now, since I stole all his thunder on the last report.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol. So this report is an overview of the KPI performance between April and November 2020 to 21. So this financial year up until the end of November. So to start with, you've got a table in the report which is basically the year-to-date outturns for the key performance indicator suite, where general tenant satisfaction with housing is 74.7% at the end of November. That has now changed to 74.9% as of the end of December. So it's literally in line with last year and 0.1% under target. Satisfaction with transforming homes is on target at 85.7%. Percentage of repairs completed within targets 98.6%, and that's also on target too, as is rent collected at 95.1%. Average time to turn around voids is at 51.6 days, and that's standard voids at the moment, and that has been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, which I'll come on to in a moment. The percentage of gas service checks carried out within the statutory timescales, 99.9%. That's also ever slightly under target, and that's also been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. The number of applicants in with family commitments in bed and breakfast for 6 weeks or more is 0, and that's on target. And the number of category 1 and 2 HHSRS hazards removed by the private sector housing team is at 456, and that is also under target, and also is as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So if I just start with the satisfaction with housing question, which is as of December 0.1% under target. So we've faced some challenges this year as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, with which includes the suspension, alteration, and reduction of a number of housing services for a period of time in line with the government guidance and legislation. And despite that, tenant satisfaction has remained consistent with last year. And as you can see from the graph, which is in section 3.1, which is headed overall satisfaction with housing services provided by housing by year. You can see that satisfaction this year is in line with last year, and you can also see that there's been a substantial increase in satisfaction between 2018-19 and 2019-20. So this shows that those gains in satisfaction have been held this year despite some challenges. So far, well, as of the end of November in 2020-21, 1,335 tenants have completed a telephone satisfaction survey, which represents more than 13% of tenants. That's in addition to this satisfaction survey we've just spoken about. So that's also a pretty good response rate, all things considered. But another point I wanted to make was in section 3.3, and that was that it was reported to the committee in 2018-19 that in the performance report that one of the most prevalent drivers of tenant dissatisfaction with the overall housing service is keeping tenants informed with issues that affect them and communication. And since then, we've implemented a number of measures to address that dissatisfaction. And as you can see from the chart in section 3.3, satisfaction with keeping tenants informed since 2018-19 has improved significantly from 69% in 2018-19 to 73.6% last year, and that has increased again to 75.8% this year. So major gains in keeping tenants informed satisfaction there. And there's also some graphs which kind of show satisfaction with keeping tenants informed within the cohort of tenants dissatisfied with the overall service only, which shows gains in dissatisfied tenant satisfaction with keeping tenants informed, whereas there's been higher levels of dissatisfaction within that cohort in previous years. There's also a chart which shows the overall dissatisfaction drivers in 2020-21, and that is from the tenants who were dissatisfied with the overall service only. So moving on to transforming home satisfaction. So 85.7% of tenants, from a fairly small sample of tenants who have provided feedback, were satisfied with the transforming home service, and only 1.8% of tenants who have provided feedback have been dissatisfied. In addition to that, 92.6% of tenants were satisfied with the courtesy and politeness of workers, and 82.5% of tenants were satisfied with the quality of the work. And it goes on to talk about the primary focus of the Transforming Homes programme. This has now moved on to the external elements, with the replacement of single glazed windows being the first priority. And it's also anticipated that dissatisfaction levels with the external capital elements, particularly windows, will decrease gradually as the programme progresses. So we should see much less dissatisfied feedback for those elements in our other surveys. moving on to repairs. So, sorry.
Chris, you're on mute.
Chris.
I don't know how you ended up on mute because you weren't a minute ago.
Yeah, I have no idea either, to be honest with you. I'm a bit lost now. I just
We've all
page.
been there during this pandemic, so don't worry about that.
So 98.6% of responsive repairs have been completed within their target timeframes, which represents strong performance overall. And that's also improved by 0.3% on last year, and 0.9% on the year before, despite the issues MERS has faced due to the coronavirus pandemic. So that is very strong performance there. And also, in addition to that, satisfaction with responsive repairs remains very high at 92.5%. So moving on to the rents team. So the coronavirus pandemic has resulted in some significant challenges for the rents team this year. Just to name a few, the rents team have had to make all contact with tenants by telephone and letter, as home visits have been suspended, and they've also had to suspend all court hearings and eviction processes, which has a negative impact on rent collection. But so far in 2020-2021, there's been a 26% increase in tenants claiming universal credit from 2,317 at the end of March to 2,910 at the end of November, with rent arrears for tenants claiming universal credit increasing by a margin of 48% over the same period. There's also been a 9.54% reduction in income from housing benefit in comparison with the same period of last year, and that accounts to over £1 million. But despite this, the rents team have managed to surpass their profile target for rent collection as of November. That was 95%, and they've collected 95.1% of rent and rent arrears carried forward from last year at the end of November, as well as supporting a large number of tenants through financial inclusion, which is great. So another thing that's been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic is voids turnaround time, which has had a huge impact because of the national lockdown and the associated restrictions. Standard void relet times have been critically affected, and this was because choice-based lettings were suspended for a number of months, which coincided with the national lockdown, which meant properties which were void before or during the period of suspension couldn't be let and remained void for a much longer period of time than usual, with only a very small number of lettings through direct offers taking place. So as a result, we've seen inflated average relet times, and that can be attributed to that lockdown period where we weren't able to actually let properties. But since then, there's evidence that void relet time is now beginning to recover, and properties which became void after the choice-based lettings were reinstated, they're now being let within usual timeframes, with average relet times for properties which became void between June and September above target, but the properties that became void between October and November below target, which is a clear indicator that is starting to improve. Voids data has also been analysed, and areas of potential operational improvement have been identified, which will be discussed and driven through operational voids meetings over the coming months, and I've been working on that personally. Okay, so moving on to gas. So this is another key performance indicator which has been adversely affected by the pandemic, and that is specifically due to tenants shielding or self-isolating and refusing access. So that is the primary reason for underperformance on that indicator. But performance now stands at 99.9% at the end of November, which is an achievement in itself given the circumstances. So at the beginning of the pandemic, in line with government guidelines, all necessary measures were taken in attempting to gain access to council-owned properties with a gas appliance to complete a service where one was due. but there has been a small number of properties where we have been unable to gain access in order to service the appliance by their due date. But where this was the case, a carbon monoxide alarm was delivered to the property where a service couldn't take place, and a live log has been maintained of properties affected, as well as any communications with residents, with appointments being offered after the tenant's period of self-isolation, where that is the case. So we have been trying to maintain the highest possible rate of compliance there. Moving on to housing solutions and the number of family commitment households in bed and breakfast for 6 weeks or more. The team has worked hard to ensure that performance against that indicator remains on target, with 0 applicants in bed and breakfast for 6 weeks or more. And lastly, the private sector housing team has removed 456 Cat 1 and 2 health and safety rating system hazards from private sector properties in 2020 to 2021, which is 211 below the profile target of 667. This is another service that's been affected quite heavily by the pandemic. Easing of government restrictions has now allowed the environmental health and licensing officers to carry out HHSRS inspections since August, and this will continue subject to no further changes in government guidelines. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Just to say on that last point, now we're back in lockdown, the environmental health officers aren't going out and doing those things again. So that has had an impact on that, and will continue to have an impact on their ability to meet that target.
Brilliant. We'll start with Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Officer, for the report. You know, at 3.5, overall housing satisfaction, listen to views, 70% understanding needs, easy to deal with, and keeping tenants informed. The dissatisfaction level is very, very high. To me, it's very kind of alarming. So if we cannot understand what the tenants' views are, and if we cannot understand what their needs are, so how can we deliver our services to these?
Councillor Abbas, just to be clear, this is the results for, as it says in brackets, tenants who were dissatisfied with the service overall. So this is breaking down what's driving the dissatisfaction of the dissatisfied people. This is not the result for tenants overall. This is the result for the 25% of people, approx, who were either fairly or very dissatisfied. So it's not, this is trying to us to understand what's driving the dissatisfaction amongst the dissatisfied people, and then how can we deal with that? So I just wanted to be clear, this isn't about all residents, this is about the residents who've expressed dissatisfaction, looking at what is making them most dissatisfied, if you see what I mean. And what are we going to do about it? Well, obviously that also, some of the work that we'll be doing on the previous report will feed into this in terms of, and some of the work that we're doing already will be like keeping tenants informed, for instance, as Chris shows you on the page before. The work that we've done there has had a benefit. So we will be looking to understand more about what people, so I think we need to understand more, particularly on understands needs and listens to views. What needs is it we're not understanding? What views is it we're not listening to? How would we show that we'd understood people's needs, and how would we show that we'd listened to their views? I think for me, this is one of the areas where I wanted I would have wanted us to be able to do like focus groups or whatever, but it's quite hard with these restrictions in place. But that is something that Chris and his team have been trained for, and other people in the housing service have been trained for. So we would hope when the restrictions are eased, we would be able to delve a bit more into that and understand a bit more in depth what's driving that dissatisfaction, so that we can do the right things to deal with it. Because I'm not sure I could tell you at the moment, Councillor Abbas, what the right things are to deal with some of those things. I think we need to do more work on understanding.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Abbas? Are you muted? Are you happy with that, Councillor Abbas?
Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Councillor Worrell.
Chris, how many repairs do we carry out a year?
Off the top of my head, Councillor Royal, it's Mears alone between 25,000 and 30,000 repairs a year.
Right. So, and we've canvassed 1,135 of them. You know, and I say it every time, I don't feel like we ask enough. And I know that you'd say that it's an average across, but, you know, 25,000, then we've got the other repairs that we do. So this is just general repairs, you know, so I just feel like we say that it's good enough, but, you know, maybe we should, you know, you take out of that the people that are dissatisfied as well, you know, like, and then we're below 1,000 people are actually happy with our repair service. So it's, you know, and I don't think it is enough. And I've always said the same. When it was me, I said the same. We should add more, and maybe some of this stuff could be built into the surveys that we're doing, asking those questions, because I think it is very, very important. But again, I'd just like it on the record that, you know, like we're asking 1,000 people when we're doing 25,000 repairs. Is it really? Carol's trying to speak, but she's not got her mic on, so I can see she's talking.
Councillor Worrell, if you read 3.11, it's 2,372 tenants who've had responsive repairs completed. And this is just for the Mears contract. We also ask...
It says 1,335.
If you look at 3.11, satisfaction with responsive repairs remains high. Tenants satisfied form a sample of 2,372 tenants who've had responsive repairs completed.
So what is 3.2 then, Carol?
3.2 is the overall satisfaction with the housing service. The repairs satisfaction is further down the report at 3.11.
Right, okay. So how many have we done? 2,000?
2,372 to the end of November.
Right, okay, out of 25,000. It's still not a lot, you know. So, and I know that you'll go that it's representative, but I still think that when we do this, you know, we could have like encompassed all of this in like the wider surveys. We really should be doing it rather than just relying on that. But I say that every time this comes. So, but what I do want to ask about is the finances, and it talks about the hit on the finances from Universal Credit, and over £1 million is the underpayment, and then it's been picked up in the finance report. You know, so could you explain that 3.14 and what the impacts of that could be to the HRA? Because when you look at the finances, it says that it will have an increase in unrecoverable debts arising from former and current tenants to write off as bad debts will have financial implications on the HRA. What exactly would that mean if we have to write £1 million off in the HRA?
Okay, so first things first, in 3.14, there's been a reduction of 9.54% in income from housing benefit. That doesn't mean we haven't recovered that £1 million. It's a reduction in income from housing benefit. Income from housing benefit is the easiest income we get because it's usually paid directly to the landlord. Universal credit is less often paid directly to the landlord, and it's the presumption in universal credit is it will be paid to the tenant and they will pay their rent out of it.
They don't pay it, yeah.
So, but what I would say is, despite the fact that there's been a 26% increase in UC claims, and despite the fact that there's been a 9.5% reduction in income from housing benefit, we're still on target with rent collection. What the thing about the implications means is that we have to have, I don't know, Michael, correct me if I've got this language you used wrong here, but we have to have a budget for bad debt. So we have a provision in the housing revenue account for bad debt. Obviously, bad debt only occurs after we've evicted somebody, and this year we have not evicted anybody for rent arrears. But because there's the assumption is that rent arrears are rising, and so therefore the amount we in the provision for bad debt needs to also rise, because there is the risk that there will be more bad debts once we are able to take eviction action again. So that's what it means. That Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the financial implication. is that the provision in the housing revenue account for bad debt has to increase, and that means that we can't spend that money on something else.
And what would we cut?
I'm not going to cut anything.
Could be anything. Well, if we've got 1 million or even 800,000 less, you know, something, you can't do everything.
It's not that much. At the moment, it's about £300,000 less, and it's a provision. It's there as a provision, so it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to need it. It's there as a provision in the budget. Right.
So, okay, because the financial, it did say, I read the finance. I always read the finance reports on
sure,
the end of
that's what they're there for.
You know, that it could have significant implications.
Yes, that's what it means, because you have to have this provision, and as rent arrears rise, that bad debt provision rises as well.
Okay.
Right, have I got that right? Are you there?
Yeah, that's right, Karen. As a matter of course, so what we would do, we would assess the entire rent income collection, and then, as Carol said, there's a kind of, so as people do fall into arrears, depending on things like timing and the level of it, we would make a provision against any unrecoverable income which we've got. But as Carol said, the movement is really on the provision. So anything that was written off would come from the provision which we've got on the balance sheet, and we have got a reserve of money for bad debts. And then the movement in year is kind of an assessment annually as to what the level of those arrears could be. So it's the movement in the provision really is what we're talking about. So we have got a sufficient amount of money or a pot of money to cover it. And then we assess each year as to what we think the likely level would be. And that's kind of the movement. So we've always got funding in order to meet bad debts or anything we're not going to recover.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. I can't see any more questions, so I'm going to move on because Chris has filibustered this little session with his extraordinary long report, which we appreciate, but it's very cunning, and we'll be watching out for that next time. Don't you worry, Chris. So if we move on to, if we note the report, and it is recommendation 1.1 that we note and comment on the report. We're all good with that?
Great.
You're getting 5 minutes next time, Chris, and
great.
And 25 minutes of questions. Okay, brilliant. So if we move on to the next item 7, which is procurement of housing capital programme delivery. So who's lucky enough to be delivering that?
Alistair's going to do this one. Alistair, over to you.
Yeah, no, evening. So this is to give you an oversight of 2 projects that we're looking to implement this financial year. So, and obviously allow you a chance to comment on them. So the first one is an upgrade of the heating system for the 3 Chapel St Mary tower blocks. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the tower blocks currently have space heating provided by electric storage radiators. This focus initially is on Chapel St Mary because they're by far and away the oldest storage radiators that we have in our stock. So what we've been looking at is different options there, and making sure that we sort of took full account of potentially what we could provide to residents, but also give them the best option, but also sort of discharge our responsibility in looking at the carbon reduction, because clearly as a housing service with a decent portfolio, we have to take account of that moving forward. So what we're looking at is actually implementing a ground source heat pump solution, which would be not only environmentally friendly, but also give residents a much better heating and hot water solution moving forward. As it shows in 2.5, as part of this project, we did engage with residents to undertake a field property assessment. Out of the 273 properties, 67 properties engaged with us, and that estimated that as a percentage of just over 50% of residents actually fell under field poverty. So then we looked at potential solution for the ground source heat pumps, and under 2.6, it shows for an average 2-bed flat in the Chapel tower blocks, we could actually reduce, by implementing this system, we could actually reduce their heating and hot water bills down to about £477 per annum, which clearly for residents is a significant savings. So it sort of really supports that drive. And then under 2.7, it also talks about the sort of carbon emissions that we'll be saving, and clearly it's very substantial carbon reduction just by moving to an efficient system. As I say, give residents a much better solution. The second one under 0.3 is about the refurbishment of non-trad properties, non-traditional properties. So these are properties that are designated defective under the Housing Defective Act of 1984. So this is building on what was taken in the budget report of February 2020, where there was investment set out over a 4-year period for upgrading these homes, both thermally efficiency, but also to improve the structure of them, because as I identified, they are actually designated defective, and that means they're actually unmortgageable for people to buy. So this would look to address the underlying issues with the precast construction houses, but also the thermal efficiency of them. As part of the delivery of this, what we'll be looking to do is obviously access any potential grant funding that is open in the market. Clearly, with the coronavirus at the moment, the whole landscape of this is very challenging, but there's obviously an opportunity that the government keeps talking about a green recovery. So we hope to jump on the back of that as it's identified. So there's some real potential there, especially the one under 4.3, the Clean Heat Grant, which looks like a very promising initiative where potentially we could get up to £4,000 a property moving forward. So really the procurement timeline is set out under section 6. That would lead us through to around sort of September this year. And the procurement route we're looking to implement this through is through frameworks, which will give us a good view of the market. And that's as short and sweet as it is. And I'm open for any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. You know, much better heating, much cheaper bills. You know, what's not to like about that? I mean, I'm a bit of a tree hugger myself, so it's good that we're doing our bit. I mean, the nightmare for future people, for people in your position in future years, is going to be the move to get rid of gas boilers, which is going to be, you know, I think Carol will retire before that gets before that plan comes.
How old do you think I am, Councillor Spillman?
Who wants that job?
Quite a long way to go.
That job is, you know, that's just a massive job, isn't it? I mean, that's, and if you're going to meet the targets we've all been set, that's something you have to do. There's no getting around it. Yeah, thanks for the report. And, you know, storage heaters are, you know, terrible when they get old. And we've all been to tenants' houses that you know, that are spending absolutely ridiculous amounts of money on heating, and the places are still cold. So, yeah, well done with this. It's an initiative that we're really happy with. And, of course, I mean, I spoke previously in the pre-meeting about the work you're doing on the non-traditional housing as well. You know, you're giving people back value. You're giving the council back value by doing this work. So, well done on that. And on that note, Councillor Worrell, have you got any questions you want me to say? Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Chair. You know me, I like to ask a question on everything. So, I did have one little smile when 3.3 talked about poor heating can lead to condensation and mould. So maybe it's not people's lifestyles that give them mould in their homes. So, it is expensive for them to run. So, and I've been in lots of flats. When my boys were little, I lived in Tilbury flats, and we had mould then, you know, with these storage heaters. And that's where I'm going, is how many of our blocks of flats are at this nearly 30 years, past 30 years with this storage heating? Because we certainly had them, and my son's 31 now, so I lived there 25 years ago, and I had those, is it Economy 7, I think they was called, or something. So are they still there, you know? So, or is it just the Chadwell flats that have got these now, and that's why we've got them? So if I ask my questions like all together, because they are all really relevant. So how many blocks of flats have we got, you know, and how are we going to do it? And if we were to get the funding, because we've already allocated this money to be spent on redoing the heating, could we then use some of that money to go and do another 3 blocks of flats, because the money was already built there? And is this, and also at a time, I would assume that we're not going to do black shots, because it's very likely that there's going to be a report that says that we're going to pull Blackshot's flats down. So I wouldn't like to spend £5 million and then we pull them down. And I can see you waving, Joy, but that's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Alistair, do you want to get that? Because it's all a bit technical for me.
Okay. So in terms of obviously all 15 blocks, as I said, have storage radius. Chadwell are the ones that are over 30 years old. Asset data shows that the ones in Greys and Blackshots are around between 12 and 15 years old, and the ones in Tilbury between 15 and 20 years old. And so,
older, a lot more.
I can work on data that I can get my hands on, but unfortunately I wasn't here at that time. So, but absolutely, we can look at reviewing them as well moving forward. You talk about the funding and moving on. So Chadwell really will be a bit of a pilot that we'll undertake. Potentially funding we could get for Chadwell could be about £1 million. So absolutely moving forward, if this is a success story, then we would be looking to deliver more efficient heating for all of our tower blocks around ground source heat pumps, yes.
Have we got any, sorry, can I just come back? Have we got any lower blocks of flats that have got, or is it just the tower blocks that have got the storage heaters now?
No, we have got some lower blocks,
Right.
but they are much more sporadically placed. There's a lot more gas out of the rest of the borough, so it's very much pepper potted.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Redstone?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will be glad. 1960 they were built, flats on Blackshots, so I think they were built around the same time as the swimming pool was built, so they've been up an awful long time. And I'm glad Lynn said it isn't always people's lifestyle, because a lot of that is blamed on people's lifestyles. I mean, some of the windows in the high rise you can't open because the children can actually climb, you know, so then we're asking people to open windows on a 13th floor where you've got young children who will find a chair to put something on to get up to a window. So I think that is, it isn't always people's lifestyles. Those flats, dare I say it, were built at a time when we didn't have all the electronic stuff we've got, like washing machines, tumble dryers, dishwashers, and they weren't meant to house that. There's no drying rooms in those flats at all. So if you imagine, the condensation's got to go somewhere. I mean, in Blackshots now, we've got water running down the walls now. You know, how much of a fire hazard is that going to be when that affects the electrics, which it does now? I'm glad to see you're doing something with Chadwell flats, you know, good report. Actually got some meat in it for a change. What we want to see is it come. I'm sure the Chadwell councillors will be glad to see that. But yes, I will be glad to see 3 blocks come down in Blackshots. Absolutely, I will put the flag out, you know, and I'm sure there's many people that can't wait to leave them. But a good report. Thank you for the meat that's in there.
We have spoken to the Chadwell ward councillors about this on several occasions, so they are aware of the work that's been going on.
Carol, cheers.
Brilliant. So I can't see any other hands up. So if we go to the recommendations, excuse my pause, I'm using my phone, so I'm skipping back to and forward because God knows where that booklet's gone. Recommendation 1.1, comment on the proposal, 2 new contracts, major works, and 1.2, comment on the proposal to delegate authority for the award of the above contracts to the Corporate Director of Adults, Housing and Health in consultation with the portfolio holder for housing, which is something that we haven't really commented on, if I'm being honest. So are we happy for that to go ahead, yeah?
Yeah, Chair, as long as Carol just said, the ward councillors are kept involved as well in what's happening in that area.
Luke, can I just ask, what is the level of money that we can have a portfolio holder agree, you know, without it going out and like for contracts to go out further than, you know, I know that we're not part of Europe anymore, but normally it would be like a big contract has to go out for a different procurement. I don't know how much money that is, I forget.
I'm going to say that I know the answer to that question to the nearest penny, but I'm going to kindly delegate to Roger Harris.
Well, I was going to ask Mike to I can't recall what our financial standing orders say. I know I can approve up to 750,000 without it having, but even that needs procurement. But anything over 750,000 needs to go to cabinet to be approved.
So does this need to go to cabinet?
It will be going to cabinet, yes.
It's going to cabinet in March.
Okay. All right.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're happy to move on then, yeah?
Yeah, it's normal practice then.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So the next item on the agenda is the allocations, annual allocations report 2019-2020. Who's presenting that one for us?
Ryan is doing that. This is a report that is a new report given the changes we made in the allocations policy. So Ryan, over to you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Chair. So yes, as outlined, this is the annual allocations report. This is the first time we're bringing this report following changes that were made to the allocations policy that came into effect in April 2019. Aspirationally, this would have been with you sooner, but events of the year overtook the agendas and other more important and more timely things had to be put on. I won't go into huge amounts of detail within the report. It is largely a statistical account of what has happened in the 2019-2020 financial year with regards to the number of applicants on the council's housing register, that is the housing waiting list and the transfer list, the supply that we have in our stock for properties of different sizes and types, the demand on each of those based on housing register data. So, for example, how many applicants required a 2-bed house, how many of those were in band 2, for example. There is further detail as well with regards to the number of properties that were allocated to be advertised just to the transfer list or just to working household, as our policy makes specific provision for those groups to have designated properties offered to them for first refusal, or first bidding, I should say. There's a bit of information as we go on through the report in the bidding section, which gives an idea of the level of demand placed on specific properties that were advertised in the year. And we've broken that down by both general needs and sheltered housing, and within both of those tables, the housing waiting list and the transfer list. And you can see there is varying demands across all of those sections. Going through, a question which is frequently asked is around the length of time someone needs to be actively bidding before receiving an offer, as a guide or a kind of an average indicator that is included there. And that's also included for sheltered housing too, because as I've said, there is very different demands to sheltered housing property requirements. That is the very brief overview of the report. So without going into all that detail now, I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you've got from your own reading of the report. Thank you.
Brilliant. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just reading. Thanks for the report. Really, really good. I have read it. I didn't think, it says no new applications accepted onto band 5, but I didn't think we had a band 5 anyway. I thought that had gone. So why is it still there, really?
This report relates to last year, to 2019-20. Band 5 only ended in April 2020.
Okay.
So this is
before that, Carol.
No, that was when it
was.
No, that was when the change was introduced. So yes, the report came to you earlier, but that April 2020 is when the change was introduced. That's right, isn't it, Ryan?
Okay.
Yes, so from April 2019, no new applications were accepted into Band 5. Band 5 is there to signal those who have no identified housing need. A decision was made that Band 5 applicants would still be accepted for those for sheltered housing. Most of the Band 5 applicants that were housed were sheltered housing applicants. So a decision was made to retain Band 5 solely for that purpose. But we stopped accepting general needs Band 5 applications in April 2019.
Thanks, Ryan. Just one other question. We obviously do know how many is on our council list, but is it still being added to, or is it sort of closed at the moment, or are we still adding to our council list? Because we're never ever going to get through our council list anyway. We're never going to get to the end of it. No matter how many council houses we build, we're never going to get to that list. But are we still adding to that list, Ryan?
So there will always be applications coming in. We have adjusted our criteria for joining the housing register to reflect the demand that was already there and to make sure those who have the greatest need are prioritised accordingly. There is a difference between people who have a housing register application and those who have a housing register application that are actively looking. You could place an application, join the housing register, have an application, and up till this point, not have placed a bid for 10 years, and you're still on the housing register. The policy amendments that came into effect will have annual re-registration, so those numbers will reduce in theory over time, but anyone can submit an application. It's just whether they meet the criteria to join the list.
How many do we have on the housing list at the moment? Do you know, Ryan?
From the last set of data that I looked at, because of the work that was happening with Band 5, we're probably around the 7,000 mark now.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought I read 9,000 somewhere in the report, but I could be wrong. I've got a few questions, so they're all short, but you'll probably be able to answer them all really quickly. Are parlour types houses now a bedroom, or do we, because are we denying people that they could have an actual dining room? They are a dining room, you know, so do we say that we only give them out as a bedroom now, or do we let people still have a dining room? They're all quick questions, so I'll ask them one at a time because you'll probably know them.
So just the first thing, just to clarify the first point, in the report, it does say 9,000 for the housing register. That was correct at the point at the end of the 1920 financial year.
Oh, okay.
The 7,000 figure is roughly around where it is now.
Today.
Okay. With regards to parlours as bedroom, I believe as properties come up void, they are assessed on an individual basis by the tenancy management team or the respective team. So I do think that it is on a case-by-case basis. I couldn't say there's a blanket rule on all of them.
So we could have a mutual exchange where somebody needs a dining room and they're not told, but you can't have that because that's a bedroom now.
No, I'm not quite sure why somebody would need.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you tomorrow morning, Carol. I've got one.
Okay.
I'm going to send it to you first thing tomorrow morning.
Can't wait.
Thank you. I will send it to you because I've waited for tonight to ask that question because I didn't know it, and so I said I'd find out. And I knew this report was coming. So with Band 5 no longer being operational, and that means we're not taking people, where does that leave adults that we're now saying that if you live with your parents, you might come home from university, and you know, like my son's upstairs, he's 30, he's not on the list, you know, he's not on the housing list, so it's not about him. But somebody that lives with their parents, then you get somebody die and then it goes across once. What happens if there's two adults that have probably helped out our social care budget a fair amount over the years, looking after their elderly parents, but they've not been able to go on the housing list? What happens to those people? If there's, say, two brothers or two sisters or three of them, what happens?
In a succession case, which is what you're talking about there, because there is only one succession. So if parents have a joint tenancy, or even if they don't and it goes from one to the other, that's the succession. It will, that again is done on a case-by-case basis. So we will deal with the people as we find them. But if your answer is why can't they stay in the property? Because
no, I weren't asking that, but we wouldn't put them out.
On a case-by-case basis, we'll look at the what's the right word I'm looking for? Whether the people qualify for the housing register. So we have had cases in the past of succession where one of those adult children is earning £75,000 a year, for example. I'm exaggerating the effect, but they're well above the one bed limit for net income in the housing register, so therefore they don't qualify. So like anybody else, we would expect them to go out and find their own place, like we do the people who don't have parents living in council housing who apply. But if otherwise, we do in some of those cases pick up a single. We're dealing with several at the moment where we've got a single adult, usually a man, older, and then we will pick up those people and see what we can do for them. But again, they won't be staying where they are because they don't. They can have a tenancy, but they're not going to succeed to that property. And we'll do the same.
Not necessarily. But what if there was 3 of them, Carol, and they've all lived there all their life, like they're 60 years old and 56 and 49 or whatever? You know, there's 3
as I say, we look at each case on its merits. It's very rare that you would have 3 60, 55 and 56-year-old people in the same house. You usually have 1 because everybody else has left home already.
Okay. All right then. Okay. And my other question is about, I'm looking at what we've got. We've got 8 HMOs, you know, not a lot. I'm looking at what our needs are. So there's a chart in here that says exactly what people are bidding on. What we need is HMOs, 1 beds and 2 beds. You know, so are we addressing that in the housing development list? Because I've just looked tonight, and are we looking at, we've got something coming tonight, and it's like, on Lowen Road, 5 3-bedroom houses. Couldn't we have 8 2-bedroom houses? You know, because that is what we are desperate for 2-bed houses, 1-bedrooms. You know, like somebody's dying in their house and it's 3-bedroom, Carol. We ain't got nowhere to put them in because we ain't got a 1-bedroom. You know, because we haven't got the supply stock doesn't match our demand. Because I looked, it said for a 1-bed, 156 applicants, and then 33 in comparison with 33 for a 3-bedroom house, you know, on the bidding. We've got to be led by what, you know, our housing demand looks like.
Okay, so a lot of that 1-bed demand is for sheltered housing, and we have lots of sheltered housing, lots of voids in sheltered housing, and quite a few of them that we have difficulty letting. So the other thing that this doesn't reflect, and this is maybe something we need to take up for the next report, is about turnover. We have a lot more turnover in 1-beds and probably in 2-beds than we do in 3-beds. So this might show you that actually you're closer to it if you need a 3-bed, but you're not, because turnover in 3-beds is so much lower than turnover in 1-beds, and again is probably lower than, Ryan's making a face, is probably lower than turnover in 2-beds. It's definitely lower than turnover in 1-beds. So I think that it's not just purely look at these numbers and then take it from there. It's also about the turnover. And it's also about bidding, what percentage of these people are actually bidding for something, which is also, and so to go on to Lowen Road, that is what is suitable for that plot, basically. Right. And I know that a lot of the inquiries that I receive are about 3-beds, about families waiting for 3-beds, and they're in a 2-bed.
But can we get some more 2-beds? I mean, look at Chadwell, perfect for those people to move out of, and Calcutta, you know, moving, releasing some land, you know, that is regen how it should be. Build something what the older people can move into, then we release the 3-beds. You know, I'm sort of my age. I'm not going to tell you all how old I am, but I'm ready to go into a 2-bed, you know, like, so I don't need a 3-bed house, you know, like, but, you know, so you do downsize as you get older.
Yes, and we have downsizing incentives for people. They don't have to be older at any point in their lives. They can take advantage of our downsizing incentives, but you're right, they are generally older. If you look at the Vigorans Way site, that site we do plan to have 2-bedroom houses on that site. So we look at each site, and some of them will have 1-bed. So the Calcutta is mainly 1-beds, but there are some 2-beds in there. But that's obviously a happy scheme. That's a sheltered housing scheme. And that will mainly go to people who live in Alexandra, obviously, because we're decommissioning.
Yeah, obviously.
The site, when we've decommissioned the site and finally demolished the housing on the Alexandra Road and Dunlop Road sites, then that will go to be a HRA housing development site, and an appropriate mix of properties and tenures can be built there. So we're always looking at, and Lowen Road also is quite a small site, so we're looking at we're not looking at mix on there. On a bigger site like the Culver Centre site, for example, there would be a mix of different sizes on the site.
Okay. And how about HMOs? You know, I feel we should be building our own so that we're not paying landlords.
The HMOs that we have here are a particular sort of HMO, and they are either with children's services as part of Head Start, or they're with adult social care for people with learning difficulties. And so they've grown up organically. We're not going to be buying and managing our own HMOs. It's not a growth area, or I don't see it as a growth area for us.
But it is a need area for us. Like, I go to that soup kitchen on a Friday. There's 25 people there, Carol. You know, we've got all of these people. We've got them in hotels since March. What are we going to do with them? And
we'll be moving. We've moved quite a lot of people out of the hotel since March, and we will be moving the rest of them out. Okay. We do have places to offer them. It's just that, as I'm sure Councillor Spillman will probably attest from his work, people don't necessarily like to live in shared accommodation, but that's
they don't. No,
under the local housing allowance rules if they're under 35.
Yeah, they can't get enough money for a flat, can they? They're not going to get a 2-bedroom flat on the housing allowance.
Definitely not. So,
okay then. Thank you. That was my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for that report. I know that, you know, a lot of these figures that we're looking at today, it's hard to make any firm conclusions because we're living in this strange period. So it'll be interesting to see how these figures match up against what happens next year, because I can imagine that there's a lot of people who, for obvious reasons, are not looking to move at the moment, which might have skewed a lot of the numbers that we're seeing. So thanks for that report. And the recommendation to comment and note are all agreed. Yeah, all good.
Yes, yes, agreed.
Brilliant. So we will move on to the number 9, which is the Housing Service COVID update.
And this is Ryan again. Ryan, over to you. This is a repeat of the regular report we've been bringing to you. And I would suggest at this point that we put another one on the work programme for March, given that we're back in lockdown.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is following all of the Housing ONS committee so far this year. We've had an item on here about the Housing Service COVID-19 response. At the time of writing this report and submitting it, and it's starting to go through the necessary process, it was shortly before the Tier 4 announcement and then everything else that's happened. So this was accurate at the point of writing. So just to put that little caveat there initially. There is an update here on the work so far with everyone in and the cohort of people who are provided an emergency accommodation under that. There is also the update on grants and funding at the time of writing for supporting the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And there is a small section, again, because times were changing. Even then we saw that things weren't going to be stable for very long. The ongoing response and impact on service delivery, I think, although there's not a lot here, it's important to note that we are constantly reviewing changing government guidance. We are constantly looking out for releases from MHCLG and other partners to make sure that we're offering our services safely for our residents. We're being mindful of our staff's health and safety and own well-being, and delivering as full a service as we are given the current climate. And that's probably as much as I have to say to introduce this at the moment.
Just to add to that, the government brought out guidance last week, updated their guidance on landlord and tenant. So actually, what we're doing in this new national lockdown is very different to what we did in the first national lockdown, because the guidance is quite different. So lettings are continuing in this lockdown where they didn't in the first one. They did in the sort of second one, which wasn't quite the same sort of lockdown. We haven't gone to emergency repairs only in this lockdown as we did in the first one. So at the moment, we're continuing with a lot of our services being delivered in the same way. Transforming homes is continuing. As we know, construction work is continuing across the place. So the government's been very clear on construction continuing. So we are delivering a lot more of our services through this national lockdown than we were in the first national lockdown. But some services are different, like the private sector housing service.
Brilliant. I mean, one thing I would say is that I've come into contact with clients who've gone into housing first, like in prior years when those pilots were just starting, and this pandemic has sort of across the country really given us a chance to apply that sort of housing first principle, maybe not as, you know, in a lighter touch way, a housing first principle to a huge number of people in terms of, you know, getting them housed, getting them treatment, especially if they've got alcohol or drug problems. And so let's just hope that, I mean, we've seen the art of the possible, basically, when it comes to housing during this pandemic. And let's hope that, you know, we're in a position where this is the new way that we do things. So, I mean, it's incredible work across the country. I know that, you know, there are concerns that we're going to have another influx when we finally get the evictions starting again, which is going to be interesting. But for that particular cohort of people with, you know, alcohol and drug problems, this has been like an amazing, you know, it's strange to say, but this has been an amazing opportunity for them. You know, they've actually finally been given the level of support that they actually need. So, and that's been challenging for everyone. But well done to everyone for all their efforts in this sort of work, because, you know, it just shows you that it can be done. So well done on that, and let's hope that, you know, the support is ongoing across the country for these sort of programs. Councillor, I don't know if it was Councillor Worrell or Councillor Redfield first. I'll go Councillor Worrell because it was Councillor Redfield first.
Joy was first. I'm going to own up. Joy was
That's
first.
very fair of you. Councillor Redfield.
Thank you, Lynn. Only a couple of short questions, actually, Ryan. I think it's a really good report. Are you saying that we've got, or can you tell me, we've got nobody living on the streets at the moment?
I'll do that one, Ryan. We have been working on everyone in principle since the first everyone in, and the government reactivated it, reanimated it, or whatever last week. We do have some people who we are trying to engage with, but who are not interested at this time in leaving the streets.
Yeah.
But we have our Rough Sleepers Outreach team continue to make contact with them, and particularly when we had activated the severe weather emergency protocol, or SWEP as it's called, not last weekend, the weekend before. We did get some people coming through that, but there are still 2 or 3, I think it is, Ben and I were talking about yesterday, who we're continuing to engage with, but at this point in time, they don't want to be accommodated.
Could you just tell me, Carol, are any of those ex-servicemen?
I don't know off the top of my head,
Don't think so, Joy.
Okay. Could we
Don't
find
think
out
so.
just to make sure? I'm only asking with my British Legion hat on.
Sure, yeah.
Because they will ask that question at a later stage. Whether this one's for Ryan, it says 12 households have moved on from temporary accommodation on their own and 9 individuals have returned to prison. Is it because they've reoffended? Obviously, they just not returned to prison because they wanted to. Is it because they've obviously reoffended? Yeah.
I would assume so, yes. Ryan, do you know any more about it than I do?
That based on the conversations I've had, that would be my understanding there, Councillor.
Councillor Wall.
Yeah, so I've just got a couple, because obviously we get this and I'm not asking the same questions every month. So with the going to court to evict, now we know that there's probably a steam train coming down the line. You know, do we have an idea of what those numbers like? Are they backed up in the court waiting to be heard? And what are we doing as a service to prepare for all them people turning up homeless? Because I think we've got a bit of a problem coming around the corner.
I don't disagree with you, Councillor Worrell. I am concerned about it myself. I don't think the cases are backed up in the court, so to speak. We know there are some where people had, where private landlords had got notices before the first lockdown, and the courts basically have been closed since then. There's been no evictions. There's been an eviction ban ongoing, but that's not a great number. What we also see is some landlords trying to dupe tenants into leaving when they've only given them a notice.
Yeah, I've had some of that, yeah.
So we're clear that we need to deal with those as kind of less than optimal landlords, she says, trying to put it as politely as possible. But it's quite hard to get the data from the courts, and sometimes it hasn't made it to court yet. They've only served a notice, and there's no way of getting information on the amount of notices that have been served, because that's just between the landlord and the tenant.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that having read the guidance again yesterday, it's very clear on 6-month notices and landlords and tenants working together, particularly around rent arrears that have arisen during the COVID period. But it has changed slightly in that it's now you can evict somebody with only 6 months worth of arrears, whereas in the previous guidance it didn't actually say that. It wasn't quite so clear on that point. It was sort of saying all arrears that had arisen as a result of COVID. So yes, I do think that there will be, but I'm hoping that also it's quite clear that the instruction to the courts has been that they should be seeing the evidence from landlords, all landlords, on how they've worked with tenants, particularly in rent arrears cases where the rent arrears can be attributed to loss of income due to the pandemic. Yeah. That they should have been working with those tenants around, payment plans and things like that. And so I hope, although I don't, I'm not strongly, but if the courts are following the guidance that they've been given by the Ministry of Justice, then they should be taking maybe a harder line with private sector landlords than they might have done in the past where rent arrears are concerned. And just probing a little bit more on what they've done to work with their tenants to put together a payment plan or whatever.
Lovely, thank you. But we're prepared.
I won't go that far. It's hard to prepare for something when you don't know what it's going to look like.
Okay.
We're all very aware of the fact that could happen. And one of the things that the team have been doing is working on their caseloads and making decisions and moving people on. So what we're trying to do is use this period to clear the decks isn't quite the right word, but to work through the cases that we've had on our books for a while and try to move people on, get people into the private rented sector, get people into our own stock or whatever. So that's what we're trying to do to kind of help us to prepare, is to try to do as much of the work with the cases that we have now so that we can sort those people out and then have, lower caseloads, at least at the start of the approaching tidal wave.
Okay. And then my other one was just around funding that's come in to deal with this. So has the homeless reduction grant still covered our homelessness bill? And what is the cold weather fund to be confirmed? Are we giving people money for their heating?
No, this is from the government, so we can deal with the severe weather emergency protocol and putting people up when it gets too cold. It's that sort of cold weather. It's more about rough sleep.
Oh, it's not. It's right. Oh, okay. It's about rough sleep.
And it's £10,000 if I remember rightly. I think everybody, apart from areas of mass sort of rough sleeping, only got £10,000. I think that's the one that's £10,000.
But is the funding that we've had from government still covering our homelessness problem, and paying for them to be housed? Or are we now dipping into the general fund? Or
I mean, it's all in the general fund. The whole homelessness service is in the general fund. As Mike set out here, we've got £2 million allocated to the housing general fund from the overall funding allocated to the council. So that is covering it, yes, at the moment.
So it's all covered. It's not coming
in terms
out of
our the accommodation.
Pre-COVID general fund. It's not coming from that then.
Well, it's hard to say because they're all homeless people, aren't they? So it doesn't really matter whether they're pre-COVID homeless people or post-COVID homeless people.
No, I meant is it our pre-COVID finance general fund, or is the government money still ticking us over to deal with how bad it's hit us here?
Mike, I don't think I'm satisfying Councillor Worrell here. Can you try?
I think it's the question: does the homelessness grant cover the whole cost of the homelessness budget? The answer is no, it doesn't. There is there's always been the case where additional funding is needed from the general fund in order to support the homelessness service. Next year there is an increase on the general homelessness budget. I think it goes up to 822,000. So that's an increase of about 152,000 that we've got on this year. So that obviously helps. And it helps to support the service, but the cost is in excess.
More than we've been allocated. Okay, all right.
And it is a demand-led service, so
absolutely, I understand. You know me, homelessness is my bag, really. That was my question.
Brilliant.
Thank you, because we do get to see this all the time. But thank you for a good update again. Thank you.
Brilliant. Can you just clarify to me, for the people who aren't accepted full duty that have been in these license agreements, have you had to evict many of them? Because you have been able to evict them throughout the pandemic.
We haven't evicted many of them at all. No, there are a number for whom decisions have been made. We no longer need to accommodate.
Yeah.
And a number of them we are still accommodating them. I read the guidance, and it's a bit opaque on that point. It does say that licenses for temporary accommodation are exempt from, but then you read on another bit, the guidance that came out on Friday or whenever it was, and then there's another bit which makes it a bit opaque again, because actually, so we know who we've got, who we need to take, where we've made adverse decisions, and where we need to get them out. The other problem is because there isn't any. One of the ironies of the eviction bans, because there's no evictions going on, there's
no
not
free
a lot of turnover, and there's increasingly few places to put people. So it is a bit of an odd situation.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that. We'll move on, because we've got an interesting item coming next. So if we just look at the recommendation, just to ask, note and comments we're all good there. So we'll move on to the next one, which is strategically been put at the end of the report, and the housing revenue account business plan and budgets for 2021-22.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is me and going through this one. So this report is the follow-up from the report that we saw in November, which talked about the rent setting process. This is the next stage of that. So this is to look at the actual budgets and where the funding will be allocated, and what the budget pressures are and the priorities, and what we're looking at the long-term position of the HRA. So just a little bit of background in the executive summary, just to add a little bit more information to it. So the rent increase the level of rent increase that could be applied was ratified at 1.5%. That's using the government formula and all the guidance that we've seen that we discussed in detail last time. When we're looking at this, we are talking about the 30-year viability business plan. So that, in essence, is a 30-year document which makes us look at all of the sort of the expenditure and all of the income streams in order to make sure we have got a financially viable business plan over the next 30 years. So that's picking up on everything to do with repairs, maintenance, all of the service costs and everything else. So we look at that over the very long-term position. So fundamental to that is obviously the income streams, and the income streams, as we know, are predominantly brought in through service charges and rents. There's very little external funding which is coming into the HRA outside of that, and there's not really been anything in the way of sort of COVID support directly to the housing revenue account. So it remains very much a self-sufficient and a self-viable account in order to deliver the services. In terms of some of the detail, so what I've done in terms of table 1, this kind of gives an outline at the higher level of the key areas of how the housing revenue account is made up. So there's the distinct areas of operational activity, expenditure, and effectively what forms the basis of the budget. So within there, what we're showing is that in order to meet inflationary cost pressures alone, there's an increase next year of around £602,000. And that isn't really dealing with any new initiatives. That is really just the position and the inflationary cost pressures which the account is facing. So when we're talking about the context of rent increases and service charges, it really is a lot of it now is to meet those inflationary cost pressures which we're facing in order to maintain the same level of service. What I've done with this, I've had a bit of a fundamental review of the budget, and I've been able to identify a few things. So we've had a look at and reviewed a lot of the budget. We've identified about £300,000, which we can kind of recirculate and reinvest back into the account. So we can use that money slightly differently, but effectively it's going in to support that inflationary cost pressures. If we apply the rent increase in addition to that, that would give us a figure around £602,000 of additional revenue. And that gives us a balanced budget position without having to make any significant reductions in order to meet the inflationary costs. So in sort of summary of that as to where the money's going or what are we doing with it, it is largely driven by inflationary cost pressures in order to meet those demands. I've also put in there an additional ounce around bad debt provisions. So I think in sort of relation to Councillor Worrell's question earlier, obviously as the rent levels increase, there's always going to be a level of provision needed for bad debts. And given the current situation with the pandemic and the uncertainty going forward, it's really just a little bit more robustness in there in order to give us that little bit more of additional resource and resilience in the event that there is a much more severe economic downturn or people struggling to meet rent. So we're kind of putting something in there to meet those additional possible costs which we could face, and it's always prudent to do that. So the next section on 3.1, that's largely unchanged from what we discussed last time. So we had the estimate of the 1.5% rent increase. That hasn't changed, so that is a factual figure now. And the table in table 2 gives an indication as to what it would mean to the average tenant at that level on a weekly basis. So the average would be £1.35 per week. I always stress the word average in this because it is an average across bedroom sizes. So obviously properties kind of fall either side of that, but it's largely a good indication as to what it would mean for the average tenant. So the increase would be £1.35 per week, given the average rent of about £91.07. The second table in there, table 3, just talks about the affordable rent properties. So the affordable rent properties are largely the new build ones. So where we've built new properties, predominantly Tops Club, Broadian Way recently. So they're set on a slightly different rent basis, and this brings into account the sort of the affordability. And it's effectively around, in order to be able to construct new properties and do them, we need to charge a higher rent in order to maximise and actually get the return on the borrowing and the investment, which is done. So they work on a slightly different rent basis, and the averages for those is shown in table 3 as well. Service charges, this wasn't in the previous report, so this is kind of bringing in some more of the business plan stuff and the budget setting. So service charges, I've sort of shown in table 4 the sort of the key ones, or the ones which are of the sort of the higher value or the wider sort of reaching ones. And what we're kind of showing there is they work differently to rent, so they're not governed by the same formula. What we're effectively looking at, this is about recovering the cost of the service. So I've done an analysis between what the budget was for this year and what it will be for next year, and the increases are shown there in terms of the increase of cost and what the percentage increase is in terms of the additional amount of budget which is needed in order to meet that same level of service. So there's a slightly different percentage in terms of those, and it's detailed in table 4, and then table 5 also shows an indication as to what it would be across all of the service charges which we currently charge for on the services which we provide. The tenants consultation side, I think we discussed on that last time. So obviously we weren't able to do the face-to-face meetings as we normally do. That was moved to an online discussion and a process. So the detail of the findings is within there as to the feedback which we got around discussing the potential for rent increases. The message largely coming back is around additional repairs, improvements to properties, and all of those kind of things. So that forms part of our base budget in order to meet those demands and to address tenants' needs and their requirements. And it's that improvement into the stock, which I say is over a 30-year period. So the level of the business plan investment over 30 years is significant. And garage rents in there, that's just basically that's an additional charge which we put in for. So we always make recommendation to increase the garage charges again in line with inflation, repairs and maintenance of the stock. So that's our recommendation there as to the changes in the garage levels. The capital programme and priorities. So this really touches on a lot of the sort of the core things or the big investment items really which benefit the entirety of the stock and effectively all tenants ultimately as we go through the process. So we set this capital programme up in last year's base budget report, and it's really just showing that what it would look like going forward. So we're into the second year of it now. The first year, which is the current year, with the pandemic and the delivery of everything like that. So we're still working towards implementing all of the kind of initiatives which we've got in that capital programme. It is a bit more fluid in terms of we set that out for 5 years and the total investment required. So we've got the funding secured at the moment in order to be able to address all of the issues and all of the items which we put in the capital programme. And this is really just sort of showing where that spending is likely to go in future years. So we're working towards it. It also brings in some of the things like from Alistair's report earlier around some of the carbon initiatives and the improvement in heating systems. So because we're working on a 30-year basis, and this is kind of the median term of the next 5 years, it kind of brings in the fact that once we've done the initial round of work, there is always something else coming forward in order to be able to do it. So we need to look at that kind of medium-term position of it. And we start to bring in things like the carbon reduction requirements, which links into the heating and all of those initiatives as well. And I think, as you said earlier, Councillor Spillman, the impact of gas boilers and everything else is going to require not only the amount of work, but a significant level of investment as well in the long term. And that just isn't an aspiration. That's obviously legal requirements and driven by government initiatives and everything else. So we've got to be aware of the fact that there are these additional costs coming forward. So we need to make sure the business plan is viable and sustainable. A little bit there on in section 4 around new builds and continuing to build. So as I say, Topscott and Claudian Way were completed. Calcutta Road is well on the way to construction. So on top of the maintenance and the business as usual stuff, we are also looking at increasing the level of the council stock. We're constantly looking at, viability of development sites and things which we can do to deliver new dwellings, and that will be documented further later on in the agenda on the reports. But one thing I would kind of pick up on that, which is something that we were able to do this year, was through the use of the right to buy receipts, which we had, we've managed to secure, and it's 67 in the report, but I think it's actually up to 70 now. So we've actually been able to acquire 70 additional properties, which will come into the HRA stock. And they should be up and let in the next financial year in April. So we're going through some of the legal processes at the moment to acquire them. But we've been able to do that through a combination of the use of the right to buy receipts. And we were facing a sort of a bit of a cliff edge with those because they have a 3-year expiration date. So we've utilised around £7 million of that funding in order to bring in 70 additional dwellings into the housing stock. So that's a good news story there, and it will increase capacity within the HRA. And it was done on a very tight time frame as well. So it's really with maximising all of the resources which we've got. A little bit there about the right to buy receipts. It just kind of picks up on what I said. And in addition to that, we're also looking at acquiring any 5 and 6 bedroom properties which are available, because there is a demand for some of those. They're very few and far between and able to identify, but we are constantly kind of looking for properties that we can acquire, because we can use the right to buy receipts to acquire properties as well as develop them. So we're constantly looking at ways we can increase the stock and meet some of the housing needs at that very higher end area as well. A little bit there around the financial reserve. So it kind of touches on this year's outturn position. So in spite of the pandemic and some of the pressures which we're facing elsewhere in the council, we are still projecting to deliver a balanced financial position at the end of this year. We're not looking at going into reserves in order to meet any overspends or anything. Across the areas, all of the areas actually are sticking within the budget and the allocations we made at the start of the year. So that is, testament to the service and delivery as well. So the reserves are largely kind of unchanged from where we said. We've still got a general fund balance, a general HRA balance, of about 2.1 million, which gives us that security around it, gives us some flexible reserves if needed. And we have still got capital reserves, which we're investing as well. I think that largely covers it in terms of the overview. There'll be some specific questions, so I'm happy to take those and answer them as I can.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. But no one likes their bills going up. Yeah? No one likes that. But from what I see in this report, I mean, I opposed from day one the decision to reduce rents and stop us increasing our rents. It absolutely, the reason we haven't been building any houses was because of that policy, which was a gimmick, and it was pulled out like the day before to get a headline in the next day's newspapers. So I don't see how it's sustainable to not, financially sustainable or financially prudent or responsible to not agree that we need to put up rent, especially when it's just in line with essentially not far above inflation, really. So in terms of service charges, you've got to meet your costs. Yeah, you can't be running that budget as a deficit. So I accept, you know, the figures that you're showing me, the inflationary pressure, the extra costs, that you have to put up that service charge for a certain amount. Now, residents don't see it that way. I've had 2 residents contact me, and they're absolutely livid about rents and service charges going up, specifically at this period of time with what we're dealing with at the moment. Now, I think it's a matter of, whenever you're asking people for more, you have to be very good with your communications to demonstrate to, you know, the people that essentially pay our wages, why these increases are happening and why they're necessary. So I think that would be, I think it'd be nice to ask, you know, what if we don't raise rents and service charges this year, and I've got one lady who contacted me, Lisa, is livid. She's livid about this. She's written to me, and I do feel, you know, I feel for her, you know, and I understand her concerns. So what can you say to someone like Lisa to explain to her why you have to make these increases within the context that we are? I mean, what's the alternative to not increasing these rents and not increasing these service charges? What's the consequence of that?
I'll take that one, Carol, initially. Yeah. So I think what we would be saying in the context of that, we would be looking at service reductions. There is very little discretionary spend in the HRA now. As you touched on earlier, the rent reduction had significant impacts on the viability of HRA business plans, to the point of where it wasn't just a case of, you know, what can't we do? It was a case of what do we need to cut back on? So in order to maintain that level of existing service, we would have to increase the rent just to meet that demand. So I suppose the answer to your question would be, we would significantly be looking at service reductions to the tune of round about £500,000. And that would, and there's no easy way to do that. There isn't any sort of low-hanging fruit, for want of a better word. We would be looking at things like, you know, a couple that spring to mind, and Carol might stop me if you know if I thought so, but things like the external decorating program, which we put in last year. So that was after consultation with tenants, and when we said we were increasing rents in 2021, a lot of the things that tenants said we took on board, and we invested, and we made budget allocations for external decorating, improved door entry systems, and all of those areas. So as part of that process, we increased the rent, and then we increased the budgets by there. If there wasn't a rent increase, and obviously as inflation kind of takes over the budget, we would be going backwards in effect. So we'd have to do a fundamental review of all of those things within the HRA, and it would be some of those things where maybe not statutory obligations, but certainly things where we're trying to improve properties and actually improve things for residents as a whole.
And another thing, another, you know, comment that I'll get from residents, and, you know, it is borne out by, you know, hundreds and hundreds of examples of waste that we see across, you know, various different departments, various different bodies, even the private sector as well. I mean, they're not immune to waste. If someone says to you, well, you know, you need to cut your cloth, yeah, you're wasting loads of money. Is there a load of fat that can be cut, or is it been? Can you give assurances that it has been stripped down and there isn't, you know, a significant amount of waste where you can make cost savings without fundamentally affecting services?
No, I don't believe there are. In answer to that question, I think we are a very lean in comparison to other places that I've worked. I think we are a lean organisation, and we don't have a lot of excess. We certainly don't, as Mike says, we don't do there's not a lot of discretionary spending in the housing revenue account. It's spent on the services that we need for our residents to deliver to them. So tenancy management services, sheltered housing officers, repairs and maintenance, and long-term capital programming. That's the sort of thing that we spend our money on, which is, you know, the sort of things that people, looking at the survey results from earlier on, say that they want us to spend their money on.
I think Roger wants to come in.
Yeah, can I just add, Chair, that as Mike highlighted in the report, up until this year, we had previously 4 years of rent reduction. And that was at the same time when there were, obviously, we had to meet increasing costs, there was inflation uplifts. So it worked out roughly around about a 2.5% cash reduction a year over 4 years. So we had to strip out significant savings over that 4-year period. And that was largely done through staffing. So I think any organisation can always, I don't know whose dog that is, hope it's not mine. Any organisation can always, always should be looking to identify efficiencies. But during that 4-year period, we had significant real cash reductions while the rent reduction was imposed on us. And I think we've fully exhausted any significant further opportunities on that front.
And I do support just my last comment. I do support the increases. So I think they are, not like I say, no one wants to make increases, but they are fairly modest. And I understand the context, which means that even a modest increases. But I just think it might look good on a leaflet to oppose these increases. If you're not in charge of the department. But I think that I can't see any other choice for any prudent director or prudent portfolio holder to go down this route. To be honest, so from my perspective, it's for me, it's about. I just hope you take that on board and you communicate. Especially, you've got to be very sensitive about where we are at the moment, and you communicate these choices properly to the wider public, because the wider public do understand if you communicate to them properly. And so I just hope that happens. I've been ranting, so I didn't see who put my hand up first. I do apologise. Who do we think? Wendy?
It was Councillor Redsell, Chair.
Councillor Redsell.
Preferential treatment again, you see. Thank you, Mike. I like the report. It's very, very good. You've answered one of my questions. It was about the 67 additional properties. So you've given me that answer, so I don't need to ask that. It wouldn't be housing overview and scrutiny if I didn't ask about garages. So it's I thought I would do that as it's on there. Just how are we doing with all that? There's not much in there for me to comment on. Page 68, Mike, you've got garages and everything else, and you've got parking areas. Can you just give me clarity on that, what it is? It isn't on the sort of page 73. It isn't on there. Car parking doesn't come in, but it's on page 68. So I don't know what that entails.
Yeah, I think we're talking really about the kind of the hard standing areas and the maintenance of those as well. So right. I think the term, it's kind of garage site, I think, is probably more of the sort of the generic term for that. I mean, when we think garages, we think of the freestanding building, but there are kind of those hard standing areas which we need to maintain as well. So they get kind of, so it's kind of that general area of maintenance.
So what are we talking about? The bit outside the garage?
Parking spaces. We also have things called garage plots where people rent the plot and then build the garage on it. It's a very strange thing that I've never come across anywhere else.
No, I can't think of any that we've done.
It's very odd, but yes, it's about places, all the sort of places where people can park. To answer your previous question about garages, we are on course to spend the entire capital budget and the entire revenue budget this year. And the garage project officer is out identifying sites that can be redeveloped into housing and working with the housing development team on that. And so some of the money in forthcoming years will be used on demolition for some of the garages where we know we have garages that are a health and safety hazard. And so we need to knock them down and either turn those plots into hard standing, parking spaces, or work with the development team to bring housing development and new housing to those areas.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Cheers. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, for the report. Personally, I feel obviously, to keep the balanced budget is the priority, and we need extra income coming in, But keeping in mind the current financial situation, personally, I feel like, the rent, I would support 0.5% increase, not the 1.5%, because I feel this year is not the one to increase. Even I understand this is very minor increase, and we need extra money, for further investment. And on garages, I'm happy to support this increase. And on service charges, I'm not willing to personally, to support this increase. The reason being is people always complain, residents, they don't get the services what they paid for, So I wouldn't be supporting this increase in service charges, but I'm happy to go 0.5% with normal rent increase, and I will support the garage rent increase.
If you have residents who say they're not receiving the service that they're paying for, bearing in mind that only 50% of residents pay service charges and 50% of residents don't, then they should be, that is the truth, Councillor Worrell, don't shake your head at me, only 50% of residents pay service charges. That is the financial facts of the matter.
It might be the fact that I don't think we should use it.
I realise that you don't agree with service charges as a point of principle, but the other point of principle, as you and I have debated before, Councillor Worrell, is that otherwise all the tenants are paying for the services that only some tenants receive. And it's a different point of principle. And that's the point of principle that we've already gone down as a council in charging service charges and depooling service charges from rents in the past, well before my time. So that's a decision the council has made about the way it's going to charge for its services. So now we have those charges.
What the cabinet decided, Carol. It was before your time. I think the council voted against it in full chamber, being independents, UKIP and whoever it was, but the Tories put it through. So it was before your time, but there was a whole campaign around, paying for what you get, but let's charge everybody for the grass tax. So, but it was before your time.
We don't have a service charge for grounds maintenance.
No, we don't, because we fought it and beat it, thank God.
At the moment.
But that's not my question. At the moment, yeah, well. There will be.
You interjected on Councillor Abbas's question.
No, you spoke to me because I shook my head.
Lynn's running wild.
I appreciate, this is the point, this is the perspective that you take, that's fine. But the council has services that are only relate to a smaller or larger number of tenants depending on the service. And if residents are paying a service charge and they don't feel they're getting the value for those service charges, then they should be raising that with you as a members' inquiry or making a complaint. A complaint which says not a complaint which says I don't see my caretaker, but a complaint which says I don't feel my block is clean enough.
I have reported a lot of times,
Please continue to report it.
I think the other point to make is that, although, service charges were controversial, like the only option, to get rid of service charges is to increase everybody's rent even more than we are now. So I do think that if people are going to say, we're against service charges, then they need to be open that every council tenant is going to pay more as a result of that, and how much it's going to cost.
Lou, come on, we're only 1 year down the line. You have absolutely flipped, thrown pence up and flipped the other way. Don't insult us.
No. My opposition to the grass tax was because people were paying that service charge who weren't getting a service. That was the whole point about that service charge. It was unfair because people were paying to have services for amenities that they didn't have.
Okay. That's not where I'm going anyway, Luke. So everybody's preempting where I'm going.
But I wasn't suggesting anything. But what I will say is that we need to be absolutely clear about if people are suggesting alternatives. And I know it's hard when you haven't got the resource of council officers behind you. I know it's hard to put forward viable alternatives because you just don't have that level of support from that a cabinet member does. But I do think we have to be like clear about the opportunity cost of any fundamental change to the way that we charge for services. But I'm going to call Councillor Worrell in now after that point.
Chair, quickly, I just want to add up something. Obviously, this is not something point scoring. If it would have been point scoring, I wouldn't be supporting.
No, I'm not suggesting it is.
But we have to be fair, like, keeping in mind the current situation, the mental stress people already have. Even though I understand these are very small increases, but giving this message to people, look, we don't care for you, we understand these are difficult situations, but still we are increasing these things. I think this would give a very wrong message. Inflation, we can increase these minor inflations to cover up the costs, but we shouldn't be supporting these increases.
I completely agree with Councillor. I'm not making a moral case here. I'm asking for clarity about making a financial argument, because it is swings and roundabouts, and I just think that whatever way you come on this argument, you've got to have the clarity of both the benefit and the cost of the suggestion that you're making, and that's all I'm asking for. But yeah, Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Right, can I go back to this? I'm going to do mine exactly how I want to ask the questions. So, Mike, it says that 457 people visited the portal. How many actually filled in? 457 might have visited, but did 457 complete the questionnaire that was there?
I'll refer to Ryan on that one, because Ryan was leading on the consultation.
Okay.
So
Ryan?
That's fine, thank you. There were 453 visits. Not all of them did complete. I don't have the number directly, but they all were able to access the information that was provided to explain the potential increases. So they were able to access the site to view what those increases might have meant for them.
So it could have been that only 200 people actually filled it in, but it doesn't say that. So if we went to the trouble of writing 457 in future years, if we're writing 457, had a look, tell us how many people actually completed it, because I could have actually missed that and determined that was 457 people did, when actually, it could have been maybe 50. I don't know, so I would like to know, Ryan. So if you could let me know that in an email, I'd really like to know how many people actually contributed to that, to have a look at it, because we've got no results either. It just said that they did it and they filled in the consultation. 200 could have gone on there and 200 could have said no, because it doesn't say that in here. And we talk about this in the council all the time, and it's the need to consult. And again, we've sent a letter. I was given the letter. We're going to do, we can't do a face-to-face consultation. Every single household got a letter. Why didn't every single household get a simple half-page, this is the rent increases, this is the service charges, do you agree, do you not? And you could have done that as a whole. We went to a whole consultation for that. We did a whole consultation for the environment one, for the bins. But the one where we charged 10,000 households a rent, we didn't bother to put a one-page consultation in an envelope and ask them to return it. So in future, and Councillor Hewlin will always say, we're not excluding people. We're excluding everybody that can't read. We're excluding everybody that has got any needs. We've got anybody who hasn't got a computer. Libraries were shut. These people had no way of taking part in this consultation. So in future, I'm requesting that in future, if we're not doing face-to-face, when we send a letter, we at least send a half page asking them, do you agree with the rent increases, and ask them to return it, because we might have got a little bit more of a fair say on what it is.
We couldn't have done it in half a page, Councillor Worrell. On the
2 pages then.
On the portal, there was a whole explanation. There was lots of information, some of which is also in this report.
But so it could have gone on a stamp and in that same envelope.
It's not. it would have been quite a lot of information, and there's a balance in paper surveys between the amount of information that you give people and the amount of responses that you get back. So we are, I think we just have to accept this is a unique year. We've never had a global pandemic in this country before, or since 1918 anyway. And we just have to accept that these are some of the impacts of that. I don't think it would have been possible to do half a page that would have given us something that you would have been happy with, frankly, because it wouldn't have been enough. And then, but if to make it enough, as much as was on the portal, it would have been too much, because on the portal it's presented in a much more attractive way, because it's a bit more interactive. You can stop and start and go. When you send people loads of information in the post, they usually just go, "Oh my God."
The portal is so complicated, Carol. People have to sign up, give you details, chucks you back out about 10 times. It is really difficult. I've tried to go on to the Culver Centre one. I tried to go and take part in that, and it kicked me out, and in the end I got fed up with it.
I have heard that before. Yeah, I have heard that before, and I think once you break through that barrier and you do register, then it's fine. But I think we'll just have to feed that back to the consultation team to let them know that people are still having problems.
Yeah, they definitely.
I know that's been raised. That has been raised with them in the past, and I thought they'd done some work on it.
They might want to have a look at the stuff on today. But is there a new way of registering your My Account coming out? I think that there's something on Facebook today saying like that it's all changing and it was all being a nightmare. But that's not for this committee. So,
Lynn, can I just, sorry, Chair, could I just interject with that? Because I've just spoke to, I've had people getting in touch with me. The letter that's come out to change their My Account, is it says hello and then thank you at the other end. Now, because people are getting things through that are fraudulent, and you've got to be careful. I'm in the middle of doing a fraud one at the moment, which I've seen and picked out, and nobody knew about it. This is coming through as people are worried if they do go on it and say yes to it, how do they know that it's from Thurrock Council? It's very easy to put thurrockcouncil.gov.uk on something, but if you're not, I'm obviously going to talk to Sean about this, but I think it ought to be looked at as being a bit more personal, to whoever it is, not just hello.
Okay, I don't know which system. That's not one of our systems in housing, so I'll refer you on to the whoever system that is. I don't know.
Roger, can I just,
it's what Lynn's
guys, can I just interject for a second?
Yeah, of course you
because
can.
I just need to ask whether we can extend. We're coming up to the end of the meeting. Extend standing orders. I can only for half an hour. We should be able to get everything in if everyone's okay with that. Agreed.
Yeah, I think it was the My Account.
It is.
It was the My Account.
I'll feed that back to Karen Wheeler and the comms team. I will feed that back to them tomorrow.
It's everywhere, Roger. She might. Yeah.
I have let Kevin Tuttle know, and Kevin is hopefully gonna. But if you can do that as well, and I will send Sean something. Because I think it's what people are picking up is they're frightened to go on it, just in case, because there's nothing on there to really say it's from the council. And that's the worry. Just a little point on it. Sorry to interrupt you, Lynn.
No, that's fine. So, so that's how I feel. I don't feel like, there's no detail in this to tell me if residents even agreed to this, because I think that we should be led, and we are the scrutiny, and it doesn't matter how we vote tonight, or we won't vote and we'll just register how we feel. This is a cabinet decision. It's not a scrutiny decision. So, so it really doesn't matter whether Councillor Abbas and everybody else, some of us might want to say yes and some of us might want to say no. It's a cabinet decision, and it's up to them whether they put the rents up and not blame it back to this scrutiny committee. It's purely their decision, their budget. The years of when we've had the 1.5 and, all of the cuts, that was a central government cut. We had to deal with that, and so I fully understand, because I was the portfolio holder, so I know how bad those cuts were and where they come from. So I understand what the cuts are like, and I understand that we've got to try to go forward. And this may surprise you, Carol, but I do believe that we do need to get on with the transforming homes, that we do need to replace the heating, that we do need to do some of that work, you know. So I am 1.5%, you know, I can live with the 1.5% in difficult times for the rent increase. But I cannot agree to that service charge. And I know I'm not voting on it, but I just want it to be noted that I do not agree with a 3.90% increase to caretaking. I don't think that the concierge should go up by 3.48 at Pig's Corner. That is my own ward. That is old age pensioners. They're having a hard time this year. This is a very different year. And I just think that we need to be big enough to say that we'll cut our cloth this year. I can't believe the concierge, the Pig's Corner concierge is a ridiculous price. You know how I feel about it. We should be looking at some stuff. It's not a full list of everything, you know, so I'm absolutely against the service charges going up. I can take the 1.5% because we are investing so much with transforming homes, and we've got to windows and external stuff, and it's so important for us to do that external so we stop the mold and the damp inside, you know. So it's about, I'm not being awkward for awkward's sake. So I'm okay about the rent, but I'm absolutely against the service charges. Absolutely. So that's a 50-50 off of me tonight.
Thank you very much for your 50-50.
You're welcome.
Is Councillor Edson, was that an old hand? Oh, not an old hand. That's a terrible comment, isn't it?
No,
is
I'm definitely.
Is that the hand you
definitely
raised
not,
previously? Yeah.
No, and I'm definitely not an old hat. But with what Lynn's saying, I'm not going to disagree with the one, because I agree with that slight hike. But what I wanted to say was, we are an overview and scrutiny, and if we really didn't believe in this, then Luke has the right to take that to Cabinet and tell them his views, because that is the way it works.
Yeah, but it got ignored last year, Joy.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're ignored. At least you've gone and taken your views, and that's down in writing. And to me,
well, I want my views noted in minutes if they're not voting.
I understand how you feel.
As it will be, but what I would say, and apologies, I know things can get a little bit, you can get a bit defensive sometimes when you're talking across parties, but it's about, for me, it was just about saying that if you've got an alternative, like present that alternative rather than just, and that's something which I think overviewing scrutiny doesn't do enough. Is try and put together on a cross-party basis, other options that are available.
Look, can I come back in after them, please?
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, thank you. So I'll tell you why I made the decision. Was I looked back at the survey that we carried out with residents, right? So we went through it tonight. We all said, yeah, really great residents. This is a true reflection of our residents' feel. So I looked at service charge value for money, and 26% is, enough for me to say, actually, of those that did partake in it, no, they don't want it, So, but then I looked at some of the stuff that they feel about the housing, and I thought, do you know what? 37% really don't like the maintenance that we're doing for service charging around lighting. So that's got to be some of the service charges. So I looked at the satisfaction of the housing services. And the housing ones I can go with, transforming homes is good, but people do not feel like they're getting good value for their service charge. And if if 1 minute we're saying, let's listen to the residents, it's a true reflection, and we're saying that's really great, and then through another report, we go, let's ignore the residents and their value for money. Let's just put up the service charge. No, I can't do it.
I'm not agree with you.
That is where I based my stuff on residents feeding back to us on the surveys.
And that's why I did, one of what I did stress is it comms, communicating to people why decisions are being made, and does include consultation, especially in these times that we live in today. is even more important.
Well, we did consult, and they said they're not really happy with the service charge. You know, like, so enough of them said no. 20 said neither, probably don't get the service charges. And then we've got a 10.5 and an 11.3. So I think that that's enough for me, of the proportion that did. Plus, I don't agree with those hikes. I just think that they're above what we need to be doing. And I do feel that our service charges are too expensive. I've never agreed with them, but I haven't been ever given a good enough reason why I should have to agree with them. So, so that's where I am.
Brilliant. Have we got Joy? Did you want to make one more point?
Please, if you don't mind, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Lynn brought it up a little while ago about the grass tax. I don't really think it was the grass tax, but although that it didn't happen. But I think where you've got us as a council, if we've got 2-story flats that are being charged, some are being charged service charge, some are not, and a lot of the things they can look after themselves. I just wanted to make a point to Carol that we have got a lot of residents out there who, in this pandemic, I've got it in my area, I've got a young guy who's going round and cleaning the garage areas. He is cleaning it, he is weeding it, and he even offered to clean my car for me. And I think we've just got what this has brought out in people is absolutely brilliant, you know, and they're all the unsung people that we don't see, you know, all the good things that are happening out there. I think it's, you know, with the grass tax, I don't like it being called that because I don't think it was, but I think we're having trouble with housing and privately owned and rented, and there's a piece of grass that's got to be cut in the middle. Well, we've mostly got younger people in there now. It used to be when older people were in there, we could do that because we had an over, I don't know, 75-year-old, and that was why the grass was cut. But we haven't got a lot of that now. It's a lot of younger people in there who are quite capable of cutting the grass, you know, so I think it needs to be looked at in a different context in some of it. I know it's gone now, but it was just a point I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joy. I think we've all had a chance to express our opinions there. So thank you for that. So if we just move on, there's different points here. So I think we've covered most of them. The committee has considered the base budget. The committee has considered and comment on the increase of domestic rent. Everyone's made their views clear on that. And that the committee considers comment on the increase in service charges. And that the committee considers and comments on the charges to garage rent. So notwithstanding, is everyone happy that they've commented and noted adequately on those points?
Yes. Well, Luke, can I just confirm
we have
that...
commented and noted but not supported.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Indeed, I think that's been...
Luke, can I just confirm that the new builds, that they're not above 80%, are they, with service charges included?
I think it was worded to show an aspiration when there's a bit more of a commitment than an aspiration. But I think it was the vague wording was something I picked up on as well. So it's good to get clarity on that.
Around affordable rent are that it has to be up to that level, but that's inclusive of service charges.
As inclusive of service charges. Okay, thank you.
Which is, I just think it was quite vague. It was vague, and it suggested there was wiggle room in there, whereas assurances I'd been given were to the contrary of that. So I think it's good that that's been clarified. So we're happy to move on to the next report, are we?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. So the last report is the Housing Development Programme update, which I believe is David, who's waited so patiently all evening. So you better deliver now.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and do it quickly as well, given the sort of time as well. But members will be very aware this is a report that you've seen these type of reports. This is updating you, as we've agreed to do, on the progress of the housing delivery programme. Some apologies here. There's been a few updates. The timing of getting reports done sort of mean this was done quite early on. So there's a couple of verbal updates I'll give as I go along. if you look at section 3 on the report, paragraph 3.1 on it talks about Broxburn Drive, and what we're planning to do now with the agreement of the portfolio holder is that there's an appendix to your papers, which is Appendix A, which shows that the red line was the original area we were considering on expanding, and we now want to expand the area into the blue area that's highlighted on your plan. The reason is just to take advantage of the parking and landscaping elements there, and there's no demolition planned of the existing homes at all. It's just an easier way to try and fit the developments in. So we haven't got a plan to show to you tonight at all. We need to go out and consult with residents and councillors, and we are planning that the consultations on that will start in towards the end of Feb, early March. That's the time frame that we're looking to go out. But it's just all we're doing is really just broadening the area of the footprint, so it includes those areas. That's really what we're asking you. And I'll plough on and take comments and things at the end if that's okay. Let me move on to the other sites that you've already heard of. So Claudian Way, for example, 3.5. We're looking to get the final units handed over by the 8th of Feb, I think it is. And again, all of those homes go within the HRA, and it builds on the other activities that have already been handed over, such as Fox Club, Alma Court. So it's good to see some of that progress. We also talk about Calcutta Road in paragraph 3.6. This is mentioned already by Mike, I think earlier. It's the 35 unit Happy Standard project in Calcutta Road. And that's moving on well with an anticipated completion date towards the end of summer 2021. Paragraph 3.7 talks about Lowen Road, and that's been debated already a couple of times tonight. You'd be aware the planning application's gone in. It's 5 3-bedroom houses, as been discussed earlier. And you'll be aware the report does say subject to cabinet approval, and of course we can confirm now that cabinet has approved the process, so that process is moving forward. And then moving back to the site options list, which is the list of sites in Appendix B. This is the 15 sites it is now. There's a couple of comments to make as to just running you down the list. On the Appendix B, so Site 2, Culver Centre, the planning application has been submitted. It was submitted in late December. So again, apologies that this is written before that had taken place. Number 4, Site 4, the Prince of Wales Public House. The planning applications are ready to go in and be submitted in the next few days. Site 6, the Cranmerville Street, Fleet Hall Grove. My apologies, you've got a typo in the report that you probably spotted. It's the second in the update section. The second sentence begins with the word contractioned, and I think that should be constrained. But so apologies for the typo. We missed that. Then section number 11, Elm Road Park. Councillor Johnson, I think he's still on the call. I'm not sure if he is. But he has agreed that this can be removed from the current list.
Oh my God! Yay!
So that's been agreed. And then Lowen Road, again, number 13 on the list. I've mentioned already that's been approved for cabinet. So Mike has mentioned as well that there are 67 properties for the HRA that have been bought, but these aren't included on the list. And they're not the sort of development sites that we're developing. They're coming into the HRA account by a different method. So that's a quick update on the report, and I can take you back, Chair, to the recommendations, which are to note the progress on the list of housing development sites and to note the amendment to the proposed development area at Broxburn Drive. That's it, Chair. Happy to take comments.
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. And does anyone have any comments or questions over now? We've got just about, I think, just about Councillor Abbas there, just in front of Councillor Wall there. It's milliseconds it was.
Thank you for the report. Can you just explain more about number 12, Richmond Road? Here you have mentioned future of adjoining Thurrock College remains under review. Can you please explain?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, it's just. Are you asking me to explain what the site is, or are you asking me to?
Site and plus the review, the future of Thurrock Adult Community College. Yeah.
So this is. I'm not responsible. I think I mentioned last time. Actually, I'm not responsible for the review of the college. That we're not involved in that process, and I'm the wrong person to be asking about that. What we are doing is looking at the site to see if the adult education college does move, could that site be taken forward for housing development? That's the sort of extent of the of our involvement. And so there's been a number of reports done and discussions are going on, but there's no conclusion being made at this point in time.
So have you consulted the relevant team of Thurrock who are responsible for Thurrock Community College?
We've been asked to consider the site and to see if there were a decision to be made. You know, what could be put on that site?
Thank you.
Roger, did you just want to step? You just saw your hand go up there.
Well, just to confirm that we are in regular dialogue with the Board of Governors of TACC. Their current building is unsuitable. We'd have to spend a lot of money refurbishing it. So we're looking at alternative sites for them to move to. But this is being done with consultation with the governing body and the principal of the college.
Brilliant. Councillor Worrell?
Thank you. So obviously I welcome the Elm Road. So that I think is the last of our green spaces that are off. So I'm, you know, made up. It's almost, you should have put me in a really good mood at the beginning of the meeting and maybe put this list at the beginning, because Elm Road residents are going to be so happy, because this is our park that we've just been awarded a load of other funding for. So they're getting new equipment and a man shed and all of that stuff. So thank you for taking that off of there. So it said that the Culver Centre was going to planning in December, but it didn't go, did it?
I think it was submitted in December. I think that's what I'm saying.
So it will probably come to the next committee, yeah? So it's definitely going away.
Yeah, it's been submitted, Councillor. That's it's obviously not come through for consideration yet.
Okay, thank you. And my only thing, because obviously there's nothing new on this list really, other than the Broxburn Drive changing. Could we just have it in a bigger typo, because I literally cannot read what you're writing, and I missed that typo because I can't see that writing.
Okay, apologies. It's the problem is
the old list that you're just taking stuff off, so it had like 20 on there all squashed in, but now even if it goes onto a second page, it'd just be easier if I could read it, because my eyes are not what they were.
That's perhaps how you print it, although in fairness, mine that's why I've got a typo. I've got a really small print and I missed it, but but the list is genuinely updated each time, because the information is updated.
But that's my only thing is And how many have we got in the pipeline, David? Have we got new ones coming? How many we got?
Yeah, well, yes.
It was alluded to somewhere, I think, that there was new ones coming in the pipeline.
Yeah, there's in the housing delivery development approach paper that was taken to Cabinet, there was a reference there to around about 200 sites that were being developed. Then they've not made it onto this list yet. There's still investigatory work going on. But that includes a range of sites, you know, a range of things, including some garage sites and things that get brought forward.
Thank you. I haven't got any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry. Chris Baker keeps waving. I don't know whether you can hear him or not. He obviously can't use his hand.
Thank God for that. I tried a couple of times to get in. Broxburn Drive site, that'd be so refreshing when it actually happens, because the people that live along there forever have to put up with cars being dumped there, engines being dumped there, oil being spilt all over the floor. The garage is not used correctly in any case. People also shove junk over the fence that is with the railway embankment. It's a terrible, terrible eyesore. So that'd be, we can't wait for that. That's a good one.
Right.
But there is another little point I want to bring up that I tried to earlier on, but I just couldn't get in. Got to backtrack a little bit here, but I don't know whether I should ask Carol or Councillor Barry Johnson with this one, but at the last full council meeting, councillors raised the question on 2 occasions with regards to damp and mould in our borough, and the portfolio holder for housing answered their questions, stating it could be a lifestyle of some of our residents, or it could be structural. My question, what I was trying to put in, do we know how many ongoing works do we have in trying to resolve these problems with damp and mould? If not, can we find out, please?
I don't know off the top of my head, Councillor Baker, but we'll get some information to you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that, Chris, because I've not seen your hand go up, so I do apologise.
Without doubt, Chair, it's gone up a couple of times.
Okay, apologies, because I'm looking for the little yellow hand where you press it. I do apologise. So if you've got any questions that you want me to put, then send them to me and officers as well, okay? So apologies for that.
Most of the guys answered the questions anyway, sort of, if you like, all on the same sort of like block with this.
Brilliant, but thanks. Has anyone else got any other comments they want to make before we go on to the final item, which is the work programme? So we note the progress of the development. Yeah, all good.
Yes.
So let's go on to the work programme. Has anyone got any comments on the work programme at all?
Right, Luke.
Councillor Warren.
So, yeah, just to say that we need to put the leasehold survey results on. That needs to come in March. That's not on there, so that needs to come in March.
Yeah.
And Carol, we had a report that come before that was taken off, and it was not on. I don't think it was the homeless one that's come in, the prevention and rough sleeping. Do you remember when we had somebody come and review the homeless service, and it was the service of the homeless people, and you know what to expect, and you know, we had that report come, and it was going to come back again, and it's over a year now, you know, so it's got to be due back. I think it was
a lot of that stuff is picked up in the homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy action plan, because that was all about the sort of customer excellence program.
Yes, it was.
That's one of the themes of the homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy. So that will be covered in the report that comes March. That's one of the 4 themes of the strategy.
It was 2, wasn't it? So it's been condensed into one report now.
There was 2 what? Sorry, Councillor Warren.
There was 2 reports. They was different. So they've been merged into one, yeah?
Yeah, so there was a report that you received which was about the MPSS and the shelter work.
Yeah.
That then fed into a customer excellence plan, and that was the sort of, I think that was the title of the report that you saw.
Yes.
And that has now fed into, it was one of the themes in the homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy, and that was presented to Scrutiny. And so in the action plan, we've developed more actions around that. There were already actions coming out of the work that Shelter and MPSS has done. Obviously, we've done some of those things. And so ongoing actions are now all brought together in one place in the homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy action plan.
Okay, then. So that's coming next time. So that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
And the other thing I was going to say was, as I said earlier, we'll need another, as I promised earlier, another COVID-19 update report.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we've gone back into lockdown. The other thing to say is, unfortunately, Chair, I need to remove 2 of these reports. So the housing strategy, as I said, the last time it was due to be on here, we were going to put it off till March on the understanding that things would be different by then. Things are not different in the way that I had hoped. So we haven't been able to make any progress given the pandemic. So I'm afraid we're going to have to put that off until the new administrative year. Okay. And the second thing is the private sector stock condition survey. We've only just been able to let the contract to the surveying company to do that work. So there's no way we'll be able to put together a report for scrutiny by March. So that again would have to slip into the new administrative year, I'm afraid.
Councillor Redsill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Does that mean, Carol, that garages will come after?
No.
Yes.
We agreed once a year.
Yeah.
As Councillor Worrell says, it's once a year and it's usually in October.
Oh, we're not going to wait that long, surely.
Yeah, I can wait until October.
Sorry?
You usually get an update report once a year. I wasn't planning on doing one for March. I was going to wait until the next administrative year.
Yeah, in the next, what I said, in the next.
Wendy can put that on the list for the next administrative year, along with the 2 I've just taken off here.
Lovely.
Oh, yes, and thank you, Wendy. You are a star. She's just reminded me. Another thing I was going to propose for March was a report on the Head Start Housing Initiative.
Yeah.
So they've done a film with the young residents, and they want to bring some a report and some data about what's been happening with the new iteration after the pilot iteration of Head Start, what's been happening since the pilot finished and the new sort of Head Start programme has started. So I wanted to put that on the agenda as well, if that's agreeable to the committee.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, fine. Is this your last committee meeting, Roger?
I've got an AOB which is relevant to that question.
Yeah, and this is David's last one as well, is it?
So I just need to let the committee know it is my last meeting. It is David's last meeting, and it is also Carol's last meeting.
Oh my God! All everybody.
So David's contract comes to an end. I will be leaving. My last day is on the 12th of March, and Carol has been appointed as the Director of Housing Management for Redbridge Council, so she will be leaving in mid-March as well. So just to bring your attention to that, Chair, Ian Wake, who has been sat through this meeting, is taking over as Corporate Director. We are out to recruitment for an interim appointment for Carol's replacement.
Okay, well, I'd just like to thank you. I knew about David because he mentioned earlier. Roger's been laying it on thick for ages, hasn't he? Getting as much praise as possible.
Yeah, he told us
bringing it out for as long as possible. Carol was a real shock. We've got these gas boilers to replace.
Nearer home, Carol, too, isn't it?
We've got gas boilers to sort out. Yeah.
Carol won't have to run for the train now when we're normally in because Roger's going. She won't have a lift home.
Yes, Councillor Worrell. All my decisions are made on the basis that I can't get a lift home with Roger anymore.
You know, it's a bit extreme to leave because you haven't got a lift home.
But as you say,
three of you all at once.
It will be much closer.
Bad news, 3 guys all at once.
Yeah, it will be closer.
Yeah. But just a quick round of applause for you all for your efforts.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
But can I just say thank you to Roger, David, and Carol? You know, they have been fantastic. Even though sometimes you ask them a lot of questions, but there is no doubt in your professionalism and how you have treated. And personally, I have sent you emails so many times, and you all were very quick in responding those and resolving those issues. So thank you so much, for myself and from my residents. And best wishes for the career.
Thank you.
I'd like to say the same from me because Carol's probably leaving. She got fed up with me.
Got fed up with garages.
What am I going to do
no trains and no garages, but no, thanks so much to all three of you. We have our battles, but it's been it's the job, isn't it? It's the nature of the role.
Yes,
and but Roger, I've known Roger for as long as I've been around, you know. So as long as I've been a resident before I was, you know, when I was just volunteering before.
You're going to say when I was at school or something. That makes it sound really.
But thank you, you know. So no, thank you all three, and so yes. Thank
we have
you for that, and
appreciated you
more
all,
thank
really.
you for taking Elm Road off of that.
Jake.
The Elm Road went. What a parting gift for me is that my Elm Road, my residents have already posted it. So thank you so much.
Well, you can thank Councillor Johnson, Lynn. Then that's maybe the way forward on it.
Yeah.
So on that,
and can I actually thank you all as well for it's probably not what we do, but I'd just like to thank you all for your comments and making housing scrutiny enjoyable, for certainly lively and enjoyable.
Lively, definitely, yeah.
It's David. It shows that we all care. Really.
Indeed, yes, understand.
You know, we
absolutely.
might have these big debates. Out of here, we probably all get on quite well. You know.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Lynn and I have known each other for a long while, but we don't always agree. But we agree to disagree sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I think it's got to come from that. We have to respect people for their views. I think we've always got to, you know, as councillors, we have to respect and give respect. And I hope we've done that to you all. So I've appreciated you all the years I've been a councillor, you know, probably too many now. And I've appreciated you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And good luck, and I hope it all goes well in the future, and look forward to hearing good things.
Carol. Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
On that courageous note, shall we call this meeting to an end? Oh, Ryan wants to say
Sorry,
something.
it was just to say that Lynn's Mansfield was trying to come in a moment ago.
Oh, Lynn,
I was off to get a gin then.
I just wanted to ask Carol and Roger if they would be able, before they leave, to come to another tenancy meeting or not. Now, is it too late?
I'll check with Connie and get the dates in my calendar, Lynn, and I will try and come along. I was there, obviously, you know, I was there at the Christmas one, where with the singing. I wasn't singing. I'd like to reassure everybody on this meeting that I wasn't singing. People who could actually sing were singing, not me. So yeah, I'll get Connie to put the dates in my calendar, and I'll try and come along to the next one.
And I'll try as well, Lynn.
Yeah. Carol, could you give me a ring tomorrow about
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a whole long list of complaints coming now, Lynn, Carol.
Yeah, no, it's only a small one. It's all right.
May I just ask one more question? Can anybody on screen tell me where to find my hand? Thank goodness for Councillor Worrell, because she asks the question so well. She gets my answer. I can't find me hand.
That's my job as the opposition.
Lynn, are you on your phone?
No, I'm on a tablet.
Okay, so it should be where you've got your sort of pad, you know, your control pad. So you've got your microphone and your camera to turn on and off, and then you've got three little dots, and next to that there should be a little hand.
Yeah, well, I'll have to ask Connie because I don't know where Annie is.
I'll get Connie to come round and talk.
Okay, yeah, it's all right. She will tell me. I'll ask. That's why I don't know any questions.
Oh.
Carol, where did you say you're going to? Sorry, I didn't.
Redbridge.
Redbridge. Oh, okay, Dagenham and Redbridge. Oh, wow, not far though, not far.
No, and it's much closer because I live on the other side of Redbridge.
Yeah,
close to where I live.
And I'm a resident of Redbridge, and I've already got a long list of things I'm going to be referring to the new government.
And I work in Redbridge, you know. So.
You work in Redbridge.
Where are you going, David?
So my next job's in Bradford. So because I live in Manchester, so it's a little bit closer to home. So I've got the same I've got housing, economic development, some capital program, educational capital program, a whole range of things up in Bradford. It's the city of Bradford. but it covers Keighley and Shipley, if you know that area as well.
Yeah.
So it's a big broad area, but it's another interim role for me. So
well, you can just go on to be something else after that, sort of Prime Minister or something like that. You know, you might want to, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure going that far, but we'll see.
So what are you going to do, Roger, with your time?
Oh, I've got a long list of projects, don't worry.
Oh, I bet he has. Yeah.
Get away from that lot in Thurrock.
He's a director, isn't he? He's a director of a housing company these days, aren't you?
Hopefully, if it went through the General Services Committee
it did, yes.
He's a director of a big posh company, you know.
Oh,
and Ian's now got a taste of what he's got coming.
No.
So you've only got a month to prepare yourself for this.
Yeah, for the deluge, Ian.
I'm just concerned as soon as I'm appointed, everyone leaves. I'll try not to take it personally.
We're going to get on now, Ian.
Roger.
Yeah.
How many years have you been with Thurrock Council? How many years?
13.
Wow.
Seems longer than that.
Thank you very much. That's good or bad.
But I mean in the nicest possible way.
Right, Chair, you've got to end the meeting now. Paul
Wendy's
stuck in the council chambers, got to get home.
Okay then, thank you.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye.
See you at full council next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Carol. Take care, David. Rog.